Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. Lori, do we have anything from you on the agenda?
We do not, Mayor.
Council, any adjustments to the agenda?
Yes, Mayor, I have a statement that I want to read into the agenda, and then Lori has copies, and she can distribute them and then include it in the packet.
Go ahead.
And this is a statement from myself and from Councilmember Crowley. And as council members, we have been elected by the citizens of this community to represent them in matters related to the direction and the operation of Victoria. Our responsibility is to focus our efforts on the betterment of our city. The mayor continues to bring forward topics related to and driven by his litigation, detracting from our primary mission. Mayor Funk leads a group comprised of Carolyn Funk, Mark Bjornlund, Karen Bjornlund, Jerry Osmundson, Jane Penny, Kenneth Goulart, Dale Krogman, Kristen Krogman, Lawrence Gooby, Sylvia Gooby, and Titnutha Osmundson that filed the original lawsuit and now have disavowed Judge Kane's district court rulings and filed an appeal. This appeal, led by Carolyn and Tom Funk, is the direct cause of increased legal fees and continuing litigation. In addition to defendants' fees, these actions are on track to add approximately $30,000 to $50,000 to in-house legal counsel expenses during this calendar year, 2017. This group of 12 people does not represent the community at large. They represent themselves and are in direct control of the legal proceedings and the resulting fees. They are able to stop it at any time. Council members Striegel and Crowley object to one of tonight's agenda items due to the obvious conflict for Mr. Funk and the manner that he directed staff to add it to the agenda. Further, Mayor Funk directed staff to place his co-litigant on the agenda to speak on this item. And as a final demonstration of his conflict and his determination to limit transparency by presenting only his viewpoint, the mayor directed staff to only allow Mr. Goulart to speak at this time and push any other voices on this subject to an unrelated portion of the agenda. Tonight's agenda includes a standalone topic, items 7A and 7AI, placed on the agenda at the direction of Mr. Funk, which represents a direct conflict of interest to Mayor Funk, Councilmember Striegel, and Councilmember Crowley. As the lead plaintiff in the directly related legal matter, it is a conflict of interest for the mayor to request this item to be added to the agenda, to participate in any discussion on the related topic, to participate in any vote related to this topic, including the agenda, to attempt to influence any other non-conflicted council members' votes, or to direct the city staff, including the city manager, in any actions related to this agenda item. Mr. Funk has previously declared his conflict on this topic to the city attorney and to the public in open council sessions on multiple occasions and appropriately recused himself from related debate because of this conflict. Nothing has changed. Mayor Funk's conflict of interest remains. Councilmember Crowley and I will not be participating on items 7A and 7A.I. We insist that Mayor Funk not participate on these agenda items and believe that it is improper to have this matter on the agenda and in the manner that it was added. The mayor has a litigation incentive to cause harm to the defendants and is attempting to do so by bringing this topic back to council after its previous discussion and resolution at the April 10th, 2017 meeting by the council's non-conflicted members, Vogt and Gregory. It is this litigation incentive that represents a true conflict of interest for the mayor, and it is inappropriate for the mayor to direct council and staff to reconsider this settled item. The City of Victoria is governed by a body of 5 elected council members, each with a single vote. The whole council, all 5 members, determine the city's policies. The City of Victoria is operationally run by city staff. As a Plan B city, Victoria's city manager is responsible for directing the staff activities in alignment with council policies. In the past, civil debate, discussion, and recommendations by city staff determined agendas. It is not within the authority of any member of the council, including the mayor, to unilaterally dictate policy or set agenda items without majority approval. Mayor Funk attempts to make policy unilaterally by ignoring his conflict and place items on the agenda which Councilmember Crowley and I cannot even remove from the agenda without incurring further legal threats. It is clear now that Mayor Funk's dictatorial, biased, and conflicted pursuit of his personal vendetta is far more important than the right of the citizens to decide who will represent them. He wants to use lawyers to bludgeon his opposition so he can decide who he will appoint to represent you. We call on this council to immediately adopt a new policy and process for adding items to the standard council agenda. This process must include a transparent public discussion of proposed items and must address what circumstances would allow an item which has already been decided to be brought back and reopened. Do not allow your city to be hijacked as a tool by people trying to make a name for themselves and their personal agendas. Thank you.
Okay, I'll reserve my response to where it belongs, which will be the mayor's report.
I would like to add the mayor's letter.
You should
as
ask
item
for the
U7.
floor first.
May I have the floor, please?
Go ahead.
I would like to add, as a new item, the mayor's letter to the Attorney General as a new item 7A.
Is there a second?
Second.
I need a point of clarification. Is that specifically to the content of that letter, or is it the general concept? What, if you could please clarify your motion.
I believe this council needs to discuss the entire concept and the letter itself, given that the mayor unilaterally contacted the Attorney General circumventing the council's authority.
Well, I would disagree with that statement, but if this council wants to go ahead and discuss the concept outside of the specific letter, I don't have any objections to that. If you're talking about discussing specifically the letter I sent to the Attorney General, I don't have a problem discussing that either, but unfortunately you two gentlemen will not be able to participate in that discussion for the conflict. So do you want to talk about the general concept or the specific letter itself?
Let's make it 2 agenda items, and we will not participate in the letter itself because the letter did circumvent the council's authority. So there's a 7A and a 7B now that will be inserted. 7A will be the letter itself, and 7B will be the concept, and Councilmember Striegel and I will not participate in 7A.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Councilman Gregory, did I?
That was aye. Aye.
All opposed? Hearing no opposition, that passes unanimously. So 7B is now the general concept. And let me get this right. Cindy, we're going back and forth. What's the general concept to discuss what?
I am because there was already a 7, so it would be B and C.
Right.
My motion was to push the current 7 to item 8, and we have a new 7A and 7B.
So it's prior to.
Correct.
So 7A is the general concept and 7B is the specific letter?
Whichever order you would like, Mayor.
Okay, general concept. We'll do 7A as the general concept and B is the specific letter. Okay, that is adopted. Anything else on the agenda? Okay, on the open forum, the,
So, Mayor, I think you need a motion to adopt the agenda now.
oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. Thank you. Open forum. Before we go on this, I'd like the For the record, I'll get into the details when we get to the agenda item, but it's important that I note here for the public that I am removing my self-imposed conflict of interest in regard to the legal fees. And specific to that, I want to talk about that now because there's something in the open forum where I want the ability of people in the audience that want to talk to the council to be able to address the council. The rules are typically the people in the audience cannot address the council on something on the agenda. So for the 3 non-conflicted members, what I'd like to do is I move that we allow for tonight's meeting anybody in the audience that wants to speak to the legal fees item, in which there's 3 of us that are not conflicted, they are allowed to do so for tonight. Is there a second?
For the record, I object.
Who would be
Objection
the
noted.
non-conflicted members?
The 3 of us.
And you've changed your mind now that you.
I am removing my self-imposed conflict of interest in regards to the legal fees.
Can we ask the attorney
Does that mean
on
you're
this?
stating that you feel that your position for the last 7 months, you are reversing yourself and you now?
So we're not going to
Not
discuss this.
conflicted.
You're conflicted.
I just want a clarification.
No, we are not conflicted in talking about your conflict. We absolutely have the ability to talk about your conflict.
Bob, do you want to weigh in?
Well, Mayor, I agree. Councilmember Striegel and Crowley have said they're conflicted with respect to reimbursement of legal fees, as I understand it. I think we've talked about this at some length, because they're the beneficiaries of those payments by the city. Mayor, you've previously declared a conflict, I think for a different reason, as I understand it. You're obviously not the beneficiary. I think you've declared the conflict based on our conversations because you're the named plaintiff in that litigation. To the extent you've changed your mind, I don't see why Councilmember Crowley and Striegel can't talk about that. That's not, they're
sure,
not conflicted on your conflict.
That's fine. The proper way to do this, if we're going to talk about that right now,
So I'm going to renew my objection and ask the opinion of the attorney. How can one declare a conflict and then suddenly reverse their opinion and nothing has changed with regards to their previous declared conflict?
Yeah, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I don't know. I don't know. I understood the mayor to be conflicted for the reason I just said. I think the mayor has restated that in a number of meetings. I will tell you, to the extent we're getting into this now, I don't know, Mayor, if you want to talk about your conflict and your view on that now, or if you're putting that off for another time. If now is the time, I don't know the answer to that question, council member. I have talked to the mayor, not at council meetings, offline, privately, and I've asked. He sort of gave me a heads up that he might be taking the view tonight that he doesn't have a conflict. I asked why that is. He declined to tell me. He suggested that he had another legal opinion other than mine, and I asked for that, and I didn't get it. So I don't know.
so
What legal ramifications, I still have the floor,
Go ahead.
does this represent for the city?
You know, Mayor,
Go ahead.
Mayor, council member, I don't know, and I don't want to dodge this. I realize you put off the discussion about this whole sort of nucleus of issues last meeting because I wasn't here. I don't want to put anything off, but council member, I can't answer that because I thought I understood why the mayor had a conflict before. I don't know why he believes he doesn't have one now because he hasn't told me. So it's very hard for me to evaluate what liability there could be to the city or what consequences there could be to the city because I don't know. I mean, for all I know, something factually has changed, or he's gotten an opinion that is going to hold water. I don't know those things though, so I really can't comment on what the consequences to the city. Generally speaking, though, apart from the specifics, it's just a directive to local government officials across the state not to participate when you have a conflict. We've talked about certain circumstances where you can actually have criminal liability. It's a misdemeanor to participate in certain items if you have a conflict. Again, I don't want to try and get into the details because I don't know them. The mayor hasn't explained them to me. That's one possible consequence. Another consequence is that actions taken by the city council with conflicted members are invalid, can't be relied upon.
Is it possible that every action tonight, if the mayor has previously stated his conflicted nature, is it possible that everything we do tonight is null and void?
Mayor, council member, no. I think the items that relate to where the mayor has said he's had a conflict and now doesn't believe he has a conflict, I mean, those items, the answer is yes, those could be challenged. That's certainly a consequence. In fact, as I think everybody on the council knows, there are lots of court cases out there about the consequences of challenging matters where council members act with conflicts. So, sure, people can challenge actions taken when there is a potential conflict. All items tonight, I don't think all items tonight deal with this nucleus of issues as I described it previously.
So I restate my objection, and I would like to understand the other council members' thoughts on this topic. I yield the floor.
All right, before the other council members, I'll give you all a chance to speak, but because we're talking about this now, I think it should have been delayed until that item came up. But in the interest in getting this out in the open, I'll let the public know. What actually occurred is I did speak with some other attorneys. These attorneys are not, it is not Alan Kildow, who represents me in the open meeting law case. It is not anybody from his firm. It is not anybody from his old firm, and that includes DLA Piper or his current firm, Briggs and Morgan. And it is also not an attorney that was referred to, or rather that I was referred to by Alan Kildow or anybody on his team. This is an attorney that I know completely separate of this entire issue, has not been involved, and in discussions with them, they directed me to additional resources. I looked at those additional resources, and then finally, when I declared self-declared myself conflicted early on, I was new. Since then, I've learned a lot about what is going on. I learned a lot more about how you determine that you have a conflict of interest and whether you do or do not. And earlier, when I announced that I was conflicted, it was out of an abundance of caution. Since I've had these other materials from these independent sources, I've come to the conclusion that I was overly cautious, and in the best interest of the city, I'm going to remove my conflict of interest and proceed forward. With that, I'll yield the floor. Council, who wants to go next?
I'll take it.
Go ahead.
I'm outside of the legal proceedings, obviously. So I'm just sitting here listening, and I've read all the briefs for today's meeting. And I heard that the mayor was going to make a declaration that he had no longer had a conflict of interest. So as an independent citizen, as a person that has been on this earth for 70 years and has been through a lot of situations and has a lot of experience, I find it hard to believe why Mr. Mayor Thomas Funk does not have a conflict of interest. If he acts like he doesn't have a conflict of interest, what he's doing, he's exploiting his official capacity for his own self-interest. It's very obvious. He is the lead plaintiff. He started this thing. He started this whole lawsuit business, the other 12 citizens. So how in the world, I'm not a lawyer, but how in the world could he not have a conflict? He's exploiting his own self-interest by not having a conflict. So as a person sitting at this bench with the other 4 council members, I have great difficulty with the declaration by the mayor of what he wants to do. As a matter of fact, I don't agree with it, and I find it absurd and ridiculous and truly, truly scary. That's it.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Conflict
Councilman
of
Gregory?
interest that has come up many times already since I've been on this council, and as it's been explained to me, there's 2 kinds of conflicts. There's perceived conflict of interest and there's legal conflict of interest. And the bar for legal conflict of interest is obviously very high from my understanding of it. So if our city attorney can't answer this question tonight, I certainly can't answer it. As far as a perceived conflict of interest, I'm sure there is a perceived conflict of interest, and that is a political risk that Mayor Funk is taking. And I have no authority or ability to weigh in on that. Quite frankly, that's up to the mayor to make his own choice on that issue.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
just to be clear, Councilmember Gregory, I am not unable to answer the question. The mayor has declared a conflict many times previously, and I absolutely agree with that. And there's not a lot of gray there for me. There is gray regarding conflict of interest law, and the mayor and I exchanged an email about that. This isn't gray to me.
Oh.
So,
It is your opinion that he does have.
absolutely.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So let's say that again.
Well, I'm,
That you
mean, I-
definitely think he has a conflict of interest as a city attorney.
that is my view, absolutely. I think I've said that enough times that I don't need to go through. I mean, we spent a lot of time a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, talking about conflict of interest, and at the conclusion of that, the council actually adopted a new policy, a more stringent policy regarding conflicts of interest as a result of Mayor raising some conflict questions. I thought I detailed it then, but I'll just read from the case, and Mayor, you have exchanged some emails with me referring to this case, so it's, I think, the case you rely on. The case says, the purpose behind the creation of a rule which would disqualify public officials from participating in proceedings in a decision-making capacity when they have a direct interest in the outcome is to ensure that their decision will not be an arbitrary reflection of their own selfish interests. There's no settled general rule as to whether such an interest will disqualify an official. Each case must be decided on the basis of the particular facts present. Based on that language, and then you get into something we've talked about as a group a number of times, a number of factors that you can take a look at if someone who appears to have a conflict is going to ignore the conflict and participate anyway. I don't need to get to any of those. I mean, the language that I've just read says if you, and I agree with you, you don't have to be a lawyer. If you have a direct interest in the decision before the body, you have a conflict. And it's very difficult for me to think of a case where you would have a more direct conflict than where the mayor is a plaintiff in litigation against sitting council members, and the issue before the city is whether to reimburse their legal fees. The mayor has a direct interest in that. I mean, it does not take a law degree to see that. But I'm not going to prejudge the mayor's view on this because he won't tell me. He has not told me what different evaluation he's given it recently with a lawyer. I don't know that. So I'm not going to throw this attorney that I don't know who it is under the bus and their opinion. I don't know what the opinion is. I don't know who the lawyer is. So, but my view is the mayor as the plaintiff in litigation falls squarely within this language from the Lenz v. Coon Creek Watershed District, and there are other cases that follow it. And I think the general view among city attorneys is when you have an interest in a matter that comes before the city council, even if you don't have a personal financial interest in it, if you have a very unique interest in something that comes before the city council, you have a conflict on that issue. You have to disclose it, and you should not participate. I don't know the way out from under that rule in this circumstance. So I'm not trying to be evasive on that. I think the mayor has a conflict. I've said that previously. I have no reason to change my view on that.
Based on Mr. Vosa's testimony there, he thinks that the mayor does have a conflict of interest. Is there a way, or is there a consensus on the council that we could put this off another meeting and try to get something in writing from the mayor's attorney on explaining why he does not have a conflict of interest?
Well, I'll address that. The decision to remove my conflict is mine and mine alone, and I am removing my conflict of interest.
Mr. Attorney, Mr. Vos, is the city not open to litigation? I mean, a citizen could, since if we proceed like this with all kinds of decisions, isn't the city open to litigation because of this?
Yeah, Mayor and council members,
Exposed?
I mean, again, I'm not going to duck and cover on these things. You waited for me to be here. I got to tell you, though, in response to that question, the bigger concern that I have as a person that works for local governments, not just you, other local governments, and having seen this for a long time, my concern, and I think most cities' concern, is just a loss of confidence in decision-making. I mean, the problem fundamentally, and it's not just at the local government level, it's at any level. The problem is that if you act on things where it would appear to everybody, or most everybody, that you have a conflict, people lose confidence in the decision-making. Right? They lose confidence if they believe that you're acting for yourself and not for the good of the city or the state or the country. And so that is the more critical problem in my view. But yes, if you act on matters with a conflict, you raise potential legal liability for the city too, certainly. I mean, if not at the end of the day legal liability, you certainly increase the odds that folks are going to challenge legally actions that the city takes. As a practical matter, they're going to challenge actions that the city takes. So yes, I mean, but to me, the bigger concern is just that you reduce confidence in decision making.
Go ahead.
So just to be clear, and I know the answer, but I would like City Attorney to state clearly, you do not represent any of us individually. Your duty is to protect the city against legal liability, and you make the statement you just made with that very clear distinction, correct?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, let me actually amplify that, and I don't want to get into private conversations I've had with you or prior members of council, but it would be fair to say, this is a debate that's been of concern to this community for some time now. I have talked to council members, former and current, on both sides of the debate and made that point. So I'm not an attorney for any of you individually, and it doesn't matter which side of this fight you're on. That I don't represent you individually, any of you. That's right.
So my final comment on this then is just to reiterate a point in my opening statement. The mayor has a litigation incentive to cause harm to the defendants and is attempting to do so by bringing this topic back to the council after it's already been discussed and decided and resolved at the April 10th, 2017 meeting by the council's non-conflicted members, Vogt and Gregory. It is this litigation incentive that represents a true conflict of interest for the mayor, and it is inappropriate for the mayor to direct the council and the staff to reconsider this settled item.
Okay, any other comments?
Please.
Go ahead.
Question for the city attorney. So there are several items in tonight's agenda that, quite frankly, are frightening in terms of the ramifications of unilateral decision-making, where we are a policy board of 5 individuals and policy is determined by a vote of 5. My concern are the ramifications of just unilateral decision-making, and I'm wondering this isn't right. What recourse, remove us from the discussion, pick any council. What recourse does a council have when these things start to occur? How do you stop it?
What recourse do the citizens have?
Yeah, because this isn't right.
Well, Mayor,
Go ahead.
council member, I feel like you're tipping over into the newly added item about the letter. I think that's probably what you're
Yes.
referring to.
Well, and related to the agenda of unilaterally adding these items without any council consideration.
Well, okay, let me take the easier one then first,
Sure.
the agenda, because I have had a conversation with the mayor, and I've had conversations with Lori, and I've had conversations with other council members about this. The practice here, and I think the legal requirement here, but certainly the practice here, has been the same practice that I see in almost every city my firm represents, which is at the beginning of the meeting, you do what you did tonight, which is you debate what should be on the agenda, and then you vote on it. It is certainly true that what gets published, what gets made available prior to council meetings is a proposed agenda that's got information and things that very frequently end up being on the agenda, but that is a proposed agenda. That's true in just about every city in the state of Minnesota, that there is a proposed agenda that comes forward at the council meeting, but then you decide what's on the agenda. You can remove items, you can add items. That has happened. It happened tonight. So it's ultimately difficult for me to engage in finger pointing about how the agenda gets set. You set the agenda.
Thank you.
You all set the agenda.
In that instance, though, when the item that is conflicted for either of Councilmember Crowley or myself to remove it would appear to be a conflict in and of itself. It's a trap. How do we even address the agenda and the inappropriateness of it if by merely discussing it we're conflicted?
Well, I think you've raised the objections that you want. The public's heard that, right?
Could you hear the attorney's response, please?
That's fine. Bob, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, as the language from the case that I read says, all of this conflict-related stuff is very fact-intensive. And there aren't bright lines. In an email between the mayor and I agreed with him making that very point, that there are not a lot of bright lines regarding conflicts of interest. I see a lot more leeway, let's put it that way, with respect to debating and participating on what should be on your agenda. I don't know that I would have jumped up had the two of you that are conflicted with respect to reimbursement of legal fees said we're going to debate, discuss, vote on whether to add that item to the agenda or not. I mean, we're starting to peel, Lori and I use this metaphor all the time, we're starting to peel the onion really thin at that point, right? I mean, we're getting down to layers within layers of peeling the onion about conflicts if you can't even participate on what gets discussed at a council meeting. So I don't know how to answer the question sort of generically across the board every time. I don't think there is an answer. I mean, I'll give you an example, what you just added tonight. The distinction was made, you added 7A and 7B, I guess because there's a perception that 3 of you or 2 of you are conflicted on one of those two, A or B, and so you had to divide it up. I don't know that that's, again, peeling the onion awful thin, in my opinion, but it's fine to do it that way. Sorry, I can't offer sort of generic across-the-board advice on that. I think generally, though, you all have an interest in deciding what you're going to talk about at your council meeting.
All right, let's wrap this up. Final comments? None? All right, back to the open forum. We haven't enforced this strictly in the past, and because of the legal fee issue on the agenda, I'd like the 3 non-conflicted members to consider the following. I move that we allow the members of the audience to speak during the open forum specific to the legal fee item. We won't interact with them, but allow them to go ahead and discuss this. Is there a second? Hearing no second, that motion fails. At that point, let's go ahead and move into the open forum then. First one I have is Chris Lovering. Chris, if you would please state your name and your address for the record.
Mayor, if I may, Mr. Levering wants to speak about an item that is also on the agenda. I defer to you where you want to take that comment, but...
Okay, so let's back up a second then. I'll let the council weigh in on this. Do we want to allow Chris Lovering to speak to this agenda item? Is there a motion to allow that?
Which agenda item would that be, Mayor?
It's the
On all of it.
Mount
6C.
Olivet. What is it?
I would-
6C?
6C. I have no objection to
absolutely.
allowing
I think,
Mr. Lovering.
I think that would be appropriate.
All right. Can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none. Chris, let's do this again. If you'd come up, name and address for the record, please.
I thought we were going to have him speak during the
Speak
agenda.
during the agenda.
I apologize. All right. We'll call you up for then. I'll wait till you sit down, then I'll ask you up again. All right, 6C. Okay, at this point, is there anybody who would like to address the council in the open forum? One more time? Okay, let's move on. Consent agenda. Lori, is there anything that needs to be moved off?
No changes, Mayor.
Okay, I'd like to move E. I think E is tied in with item 6B. 6B is the Lions Shelter, the request for financing, the loan. So I'd like to have that one pulled off, and we can discuss that and this at the same time. Is there any other requests for changes to the consent agenda? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item minus item 4E?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended minus item E.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The consent agenda is adopted with the one change. Number 5, visitor presentation. Lori?
Thank you, Mayor. This evening we have Friends of Randy Miller, Zach Peglow, and Larissa Zeisler, and they're here to talk about ideas to permanently memorialize Randy Miller. We've talked about Randy in this chambers many times. In fact, up until his recent passing, he was generally here with us, and for the group, you know, we've talked about Randy's contributions to our community many times, but Randy was the driving force behind the Victoria Business Association and many of the events and community events that we hold so dear. And we've said so many times since he's been gone that, oh, I wish Randy was here because he could get this taken care of. So a group has come together to generate ideas about how to memorialize him in Victoria. Recommendations to that effect were before the Park and Recreation Committee last Monday, and they made a couple of votes, which are noted in your staff report, to recommend ideas. But I will let Zach and Larissa present those specifically at this time. Oh, and it looks like Jeff Hartman will join them, which is great. Thanks, Jeff.
Would you each please state your name and address for the record?
Zach Peglow, 1470
Oh,
Wintergreen.
microphone.
Zach Peglow, 1470 Wintergreen Court.
Larissa Zeisler, 13875 Chestnut Drive in Eden Prairie.
Jeff Hartman, Victoria, 7848 Bavaria Road.
All right, I'm gonna start off. I got some packets here with all the details for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zach.
We'll share.
Lori, can we make sure these are available to the public?
Zach, do you have one extra copy? If you could just hand it to Cindy in the green, she makes sure that.
All right, so my name's Zach Peglow, and I've lived in Victoria for 18 years now. Although I'm only 19 years old, I've seen this town change for the good. The reason I'm before you today is for an individual who has impacted this town like no one other has. Someone who has devoted hundred of hours, thousands of dollars in his life to this town, Randy Miller. Now, many of you may be wondering why a 19-year-old is trying to make sure Randy's recognized the way he should be. I met Randy in the summer of 2012, and from there on, he's become a mentor to me. He was almost a second dad to me, as some say. I have so many good memories with him, and not a single one of them will ever gone unforgotten. Everything from working all the events by his side, such as Volksfest and the car shows, to going to catching up, talking, and eating. This past August, before I went off to college, we were downtown at Vic's Bar and Grill. The day before I left for college, he made the comment to me, "If you ever get any trouble or simply just want to talk, call me. It's those kind of comments that made Randy so special to me. I was never able to give Randy the proper goodbye due to me not being in Minnesota. But now I see my chance, and this is what I'm going to do. At Randy's funeral, and many of you guys know this as you were there, Father Bob said that Randy was very persistent and would not take no for an answer, and this is what we came to do. We want to be persistent about this and not take no for an answer. So now Larissa will talk about kind of what he did for the city. A lot of you guys know what he did and everything like that.
So I had the opportunity and the privilege actually to work with Randy with the VBA. I was in charge of the marketing and the design for about 5 years, and closely with Randy we talked about his passion for the city, and every time a great event would go on, he never talked about what he put into it. He talked about how it just brought everybody together and the businesses together, and that unity and that focus of Victoria is a place that we want people to come to. And so part of the reason why I want to be here today to speak on this is just to show my support for this community and say that I've experienced a lot of the work that Randy put into this, and I think that it would be just a very smart thing to do for this community to show that back, how much he was loved and cherished, and the work that he did for this community, to show his honor to him. So.
All right, so we got 3 ideas that we want to see go in place. The first one would be Randy Road. It is we would like to name the alley that runs from the grocery store, the old grocery store, down to Vic's Bar and Grill. If you flip to that first page there's a quote there that from EFA. Ann gave me that company. It's who the city goes through for all their signage. But they said it'd be about $113 for 2 signs that say Randy Road. They each come with posts and mounts and everything like that. Like we'd like to put one down by the Victoria House and one up by the grocery store. That is the first idea we'd like to see go in place. And then the second one is Bayfront Plaza. We'd like to rename that to Miller Plaza, and primarily because he was big part in everything in the city and just another way to get his name out there. And do you want to talk about the
Yeah,
memorial?
I think one of the ideas was to put a plaque somewhere near the plaza, similar to what we did at the monument, put a stone or a rock, choose a rock, and put a bronze plaque with some verbiage about Randy and even a little picture etched in it so you can see his face every day you walk by. But we've chosen a couple places which you can see is circled on the overhead map that we looked at that thought it would be a good location and would fit. But that's primarily what we're trying to do is put his face and his name in that plaza, which he spent a lot of time with us on during the production of it and building it, and thought that would be a good spot along with the signage on the road. And it could be Randy's Road or Randy's Way. We had another idea, but
Way might be
We
appropriate.
kind of like Randy Way.
Randy's Way or Randy Way. Yeah, so if we all know Randy, we don't have to go on and on, but that's really what we're trying to do is just give us payback, all his work he put in and all his, tireless effort that we see him do every day, and hopefully we can handle it with the city. And I think Zach put some costs together for that, and basically we're just looking at the plaque itself, and I helped him with the rock and the stone and the plaque of the monument, and I told him I would take care of that. So we're just looking for the plaque itself, some costs that we could get reimbursed. I think that's pretty much
That's it.
and the ideas. So if anybody else has other ideas, that we're open to that, but that's where we're coming from.
Okay, thank you. Council questions? Councilman Crowley?
No questions. I absolutely am in favor of this. I would like to move forward.
Councilman Striegel?
Absolutely support it. Randy never made it anything about himself. He only made it about the city. He always thanked the city for supporting his events, and I always felt like the best thing we could do is get out of the way and let Randy be Randy and make Victoria, just be a better place. He was a great leader because that's not a title. That's what you are when people want to follow you, and that's a great thing. Also, just a quick question, and that is if individuals, private citizens, want to contribute to the cause, if they want to make a personal donation, how do they do that?
I don't know if we have anything set up for that, but I would assume that would be great.
Just contact one of you three and
Yeah,
maybe leave contact information with Laurie so
sure,
that,
absolutely.
okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you.
Councilman Vogt?
First of all, I'm going to have a kind of a technical discussion. I'm a fan of Randy Miller, and I was at the funeral, and this is hard for me, but I just want to add some protocol here a little bit because this is the second park naming that City Hall's been stormed, so to speak. And I've got a question. The area on the other side of the path, we're talking about the pavers and everything we're putting into the area on the street side of the path. And that's, we refer to that as what again? The
Bayfront Plaza.
Bayfront Plaza.
Yeah.
Now, the area right on the other side of the path where there's the gravel and the staging area where people could sit, is that part of the plaza or is that, what is that?
I think that's Bayfront Park, maybe.
Because we're about to go on a hunt to, how much is that gonna cost to rebuild that area on the other side of the path?
130 to 160, but that's property that belongs to Three Rivers Park District.
It does,
Yes.
right, okay.
130,000?
Well, we will need some incentives to get that 130,000. One incentive could be to name that stretch of land, or I don't know what incentives you're gonna use to get people to come up with $130,000 or $160,000 to do that strip. So I'm a little bit leery here of the fact that we've got still a major expenditure ahead of us, and we have to incentivize it we have to get somebody to come forward hopefully we can get some bigger donors rather than many small ones, because so we can do it sooner rather than later. So I'm a little bit worried about rushing to name things too quickly. Secondly, this came up this item was discussed and kind of approved at the Planning Commission, but it wasn't even on the Planning Commission agenda, was it?
If I may, Park and Rec Committee.
Park and Rec, the Park and Rec Committee. Excuse me, I know it was Park and Rec. But if I understand right, it wasn't even on their agenda. They decided to discuss it somehow, and it was. Is that true?
The park naming policy was on the agenda. The specific for Randy Miller was not specifically on the agenda. It was added on Monday evening.
Okay, so it was added on at the meeting, just like we've added on things here at this meeting.
Correct.
So I just want people to pause for a second that, we're not done developing that area. And I don't want to belittle anything Randy did because I watched him in action, and that's the way it really was. We were watching him because we didn't jump in and do all those things that Randy did. And I certainly think he's deserving to have all this stuff. I just want to bring that up for consideration, that we've got a policy. Has the staff looked at this whole concept? I presume they have, since the Parks and Rec Committee discussed it.
Correct.
That's my only comment, but I don't want to get that confused with the fact that I know what Randy did. But here we go again. We're really rushing hard to name a park. So,
Councilmember Gregory?
Randy's accomplishments are long and many, and I'm truly grateful for all of his accomplishments and all of his contributions to our city. I truly am. He did a lot for the city. He was also very involved with city politics as well. He came to each and every council meeting, and he was very involved with everything that the former mayor and council did. He was pretty much in contact constantly with that group. And some of the things that came out of that were controversial. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't look at where this land came from for this park, which was in the land swap. The land swap created some issues, and we're going to be talking about it as far as the legal fees go later on the agenda. Park and Rec meeting, I was there. They had good discussion. We talked about renaming the park. We talked about renaming the road, and we also talked about the rock. The motion that was made by Committee Member Roberts was we could do the road or we could do the park. The plaque never quite made it up, so the motion was either or. With that in mind, I could certainly support the road. I could support the plaque. I think because of the controversy that the land swap created, I don't think I could support the park.
Can I, may I?
Yep, go ahead.
Just to clarify, Councilmember Gregory, Randy Miller had nothing to do with the land swap.
No, I know. He just was involved with politics and decisions that were made.
He was completely uninvolved with Bayfront Park. That was land that was contributed by the property owner, and it had nothing to do with Randy. And I do not want to in any way put any tarnish on Randy's name because that's just inappropriate.
I can't believe we're politicizing a discussion about memorializing one of our best ambassadors.
Sorry, that it was not my intention at all. It was not my intention. There are a lot of good people that have sat in these chairs before us, a lot of good people in this town. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. And I'm not disrespecting Randy in any way, shape, or form. Please don't get me wrong. And I'm not trying to politicize it. I'm just trying to acknowledge that there were some issues. And Randy, and I don't even want to, it's difficult for me to sit here and try to articulate this because I don't want to be disrespectful to Randy in any way, shape, or form, because I know he meant so much to so many people.
So I'd like to remind the council, let's please wait until you're recognized by the chair before making comments on the floor. My comments specific to this is the staff report apparently doesn't completely represent what happened in the Park and Rec Committee as far as some of the motions. What I heard tonight is, I think I heard you guys saying all three of these to be done, but that didn't sound like what happened in Park and Rec. So further, in addition to what Councilmember Vogt said with Madison Park, I think we need to get this policy reviewed and get this all in sync. I'm not opposed to the park, but I do think that the staff report has to reflect what the Park and Rec Committee actually provided motions on and voted on, so that accurately, when it comes in front of the council, we know what was discussed. And it seems like the plaque, there's no motion on the plaque. So what I would like to do is suggest to the council that maybe we table this item until the next council meeting or the one after that, depending on the load, so that we can kind of clean up the staff report, make sure it's right. If the Park and Rec Committee want to kind of go back and rejigger some of those motions, that way when it comes back to the council, it would be appropriate. And then maybe in the meantime, the council can look at the park naming policy and kind of get that piece of it clarified at the same time. So I'm not against this. I'm just saying to Councilmember Vogt's point, maybe we should just table this. Let's get the policy fixed up, give the Park and Rec a chance to clean that up, and then we can bring this back in front of the council. So I make the motion that we table this until such time as the Park and Rec can clarify those issues and the city council can go ahead and adjust the park naming policy. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a valid motion on the floor. Further discussion? Councilmember
I was just
Strigl?
wondering if we could put a defined date. Is there any reason why the council or the staff report can't be done by the next meeting? It seems we're 99% of the way there. Can we just make those clarifications and put it back on the agenda for our next meeting?
That would be fine.
I move we amend that motion to table this until the next council meeting when that staff report can be adjusted. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
No,
All opposed?
I said no.
Okay. Motion passes 4-1. Councilmember Crowley voted no. Okay, thank you. Appreciate you guys bringing this forward. Next item, new business. Lori?
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight we have several items that are called out on the agenda separately, but are related to a proposed improvement to the Lions Park shelter, which is at Lions Park and would be completed by generally the Victoria Alliance. This is a project we've talked about numerous times over the past year or so. The first item relates to site plan and building materials, and Aaron Smith will give a staff report on that element of the project.
Mayor and Council, like Lori said tonight, the first step is reviewing the site plan and building materials for the lion shelter. I am pretty sure that everyone generally knows where Lions Park is.
Our monitors are down here.
Can we hang on just a second? None of the council monitors are working.
If you guys in the bottom right-hand corner of your screens, if you can try a simple power off and power on of your monitor. As you know, we've not experienced these screen failures in many months.
Were they working at all tonight?
You know, I don't
Yeah.
They were power on, but I don't think they ever had anything presented.
Says no signal.
So in order to, if you guys can look at what's being broadcast, I would ask our AV person to keep it on the presentation for the duration. That way you'll have, it's a little further away view, but that should work as a backup. Members of the public are able to see on the side screens, so it is these monitors only that are not working. And if this becomes problematic, the next diagnostic option is for us to take a break and me to shut down the system,
Does that usually fix it if there's a reboot?
usually.
Okay, let's, unless there's objections, let's continue on.
Fine.
All right, Aaron, please proceed.
So here are two aerial photos of Lions Park. Left is zoomed out a bit, so right across from St. Victoria Church. and on the right is more site-specific to where the shelter is located for renovation. Al Orson is in the audience tonight. He's a member of the Lions and has done a lot of work on this project, so he's going to do kind of the heavy lifting for the presentation. As part of this review process, the Planning Commission did review the information at our last meeting last Tuesday. We also held a neighborhood meeting, which was by request of the City Council. This step for this project isn't typical, but since there is such a large community around the project, it's been important to get some notification out. So we sent about 160 letters out to the neighboring property owners. We had 6 attend the neighborhood meeting. Generally, their feedback was really positive. There were some concerns about parking during heavy events, including like the softball tournament, and if they were to have pancake breakfasts. We had a good discussion just at the staff level with the neighbors and hoping to work out some of the kinks that seem to keep occurring during at least these large events. There also were some questions about security, which Al Orson did a really nice job walking through. And generally walking away, I think the neighboring property owners were supportive of the project and excited to see it move forward. The park after the renovation is going to operate really similarly to how it does today. So maintenance and reservations will still be completed through the Parks and Rec department. So the same way that you would reserve the shelter today will continue once the renovation is complete. The left photo here is the current conditions just snapped off Google Earth. So this is the shelter that is being identified for renovation, and on the right are some images that Al has provided for us. And I will welcome Al Orson up if you would like to join us.
Al, name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Al Orson, 7222 Lilac Lane. Been a resident in Wayzata for 40-some years, and a Lions member for over 40 years also. I'll run through.
Real quick, you were a past president. Are you still the current president, or I think that's somebody else?
No, I was president back in, I believe, 85.
Oh, okay. All right, sorry. Go ahead, please.
This is a three-dimensional model of the parking lot, the shelter itself, and the area around that. What we are proposing to do is to take down this shelter, which was built back in, I think it was 1979. It's almost 40 years old, and then remove the concrete and rebuild it in that same location. This is an aerial view of the two buildings there, the Lions Den, the concession building. And what we're proposing to do is to leave those two buildings in place. All the yellow there is concrete that will be removed. And then we will put back actual footings and a heated floor and a new structure that will have garage doors around it. I believe there are 11 garage doors, and it will be open air in the summer, and then as fall and winter approaches, the heat can be turned on, the doors closed, and it can become a facility to be used year-round. So after demolition, it would look like that. All the concrete would be down, and we would be back to that phase. After demolition, the very next thing that will take place is once you start remodeling a building, you have to fire sprinkler the new part plus the existing. So all three, the entire structure will be fire sprinklered. Currently, there's only an 1.5 inch or 1.25 inch line into the building. So we're going to directional bore from the north side over here a new 6-inch line into the breezeway to provide that fire service. Okay, so after demolition, as I stated, we would be back to this condition. Then the next thing that would happen is we would be putting in a full foundation and a new floor, and that floor would be hydronically heated. The next thing after getting the water line in, structurally, this wall requires that we close one of the serving windows, and we chose the north window. Plus, that has to be raised 3 feet and a bond beam put across here, because originally that wall was non-structural and didn't carry under any load, but it will now carry load because the trusses will be running the other direction. Then the framing will go up, and I'll run through this fairly quick. And the trusses will be on, and as you can see, the trusses will be scissor trusses, so they'll have a cathedral ceiling inside. And this shows with the doors open in the summer, giving you a three-dimensional view going around the. Plus, we will be closing in the breezeway. And on the south side, as I get back around here, we are adding a hallway along the south side, so there will be an interior way to get to the bathrooms without having to go outside. Then, as like I said, when winter comes, the doors will be closed, locked, closed for the remainder of the season. Material-wise, this is the stone that will be around the bottom 30 inches. Then up to the eave will be a lap siding, and we are choosing to use an engineered wood product that's called LP siding that is pre-finished, has a 20-year warranty on the finish. So there will be basically and I chose this material over the other option that we looked at was a hardy board, but a hardy board is a cement product, and it can break with someone throwing a baseball against it or hitting it, and it's hard to repair. And this is actually structurally stronger. Then the dark brown above that will be the same hardy board, but it's in a panel, a 4 foot by 8 foot panel, and then has white banding, trim banding that will be white. And then the very peak, there's an almond. Again, it's a LP product. Just for scale, I put in the existing trees that are closest to the building and a pickup for kind of scale as to how large the building is. The peak of the new building, because this is a 612 pitch, and the interior of the cathedral ceiling is 412, which matches the existing pitch on the building. That's the concession stand in the Lion's Den. So just for scale. This is next one here is an interior perspective. On the interior, up to the top of the garage doors will be half-inch plywood sheeting, and then we're putting a glass liner, a glass board. It's only about 1/8 of an inch thick. It's commonly called FRP, fiber reinforced plastic. So that's washable, durable. It's often used in bathrooms, commercial kitchens, etc. Then above the garage doors, 5 foot high on this side, and all the gable ends will be a product called Tectum, which is a sound reduction board. It's 1.25 inch board because of the concrete floor, and the ceiling will be a tongue and groove knotty pine that will be probably a light brown color. And the concrete floor will be a 4-layer. Pass this around. 4-layer epoxy coating, and then it has quartz chips embedded into the layer, and then a clear coat put over the top, and has a guaranteed life of 25 years. So unless there are further questions, that kind of concludes my presentation. Lori, you're going to get into the financing, or do you want me to comment?
I will.
That's the next
probably,
item,
but-
isn't it?
Yep.
Okay. Aaron, anything to add?
No, if you'd like to discuss, please feel free.
Okay, thanks, Al. Councilmember Corley?
No comments.
Councilmember Strigel?
I'm curious, thank you, if there's any staff impact for the reservations and the management of the facility, and if there's any revenue impact. Do we anticipate generating some additional revenue through renting that space out as it's upgraded and looks like it to be a really nice.
Yeah, we have not discussed specifically whether the rent would change, but we have anticipated that it would be rented out more frequently. And could you repeat the first part of your question?
Was there any staff impact? I mean, do you anticipate that the process of taking reservations and managing it will be any significantly different than today?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Councilmember Vogt?
I think you've done your homework. I always thought Hardy Board was impervious to everything. So, it's very,
Not really.
I have nothing.
All right, we don't have the motion up.
I can make a motion.
Sorry, it just took me a minute to get it there.
Is it working now?
Up on the screen over here.
Oh, thank you. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion, we approve the resolution related to the approval of the site plan and building materials for the Lions Park shelter.
second motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 6B. This one, I requested that 4E from the consent agenda be moved to be discussed at the same time. Thank you. Just very quickly, my only question was, as I read the staff report for 6B, well, first, before I get into that, Lori, do you want to do a quick introduction, please, for this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The city had budgeted through the CIP $100,000 for the replacement of ball field fencing at 3 fields at Lions Park. We've discussed this project a little bit before because we, prior to bringing approval of the contract to the council, had notified you that that item, quotes were coming in significantly under budget. The item you have before you tonight is for $52,394. The council previously awarded the remaining balance of that CIP item, the $100,000, to the Lions Park shelter improvement. That was about $42,000 that was awarded to the Lions project. Happy to take questions if you have them, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Since I moved 4E, let me just make the one comment. Give or take, the consent agenda item was $50,000 for the fencing. And when I read the staff report for this financing loan, I'm wondering whether or not the council has any thoughts, and I'd like to get their input as far as, do we delay replacing the fence and use that $50,000 towards this kind of financing request? Because as I read the report, it says there's no guarantee for the city to get this money back. There's no way to guarantee that. And so maybe we reallocate that money to minimize any exposure. If we're able to raise all of the money and there's not an issue, then we can always redo the fence at a later date. So I don't know if we can do that because of the pots of money, but Lori, if you could comment on that, and then I'd like to see if the council has any interest in doing that.
I don't think there's any reason why the council couldn't choose to reallocate those CIP funds. I need to look at Kelly. I'm going to ask the finance director to address that piece. I would note, for those looking at the packet or at home, there are photos of the existing fence in the packet, where if you want to look at the project that's being contemplated, this is something that the city has been planning for a number of years. Thanks, Kelly.
Is it possible to move that money?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, it comes down to separate funds that we're looking at. So the ball field fence is coming out of a separate fund. The proposed loan that we're talking about would be coming out of a different fund. So there really wouldn't be a benefit to delaying the fence, because we're talking about the funds coming out of different funds. So.
Well, my thought is just the Lions Club is going to pay us back at 10 years at 3% interest, which is really fair. But if something happens and they're not able to pay back, and we have that fund, it just minimizes the risk to the taxpayer. And that's kind of what I'd want the council to weigh in on. I agree. I looked at the photos. The fence definitely does need repair. And so now that we know that we can, I'd like to ask the council to comment whether they agree that's something we should consider, or we should just go ahead and approve the fence and then approve the loan. So with that thought, Councilmember Crowley, would you begin, please?
I guess I have a question for for Ann. What is the impact to the ball fields of not repairing them? I think that's really has to drive this decision.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The fences actually are 30-plus years of age, most of them. Numerous repairs have been made to a lot of them. One of the issues when the fences went in, they used a lot of concrete to cement the posts in. And every year we have that pushing up. And as you look at the fences, especially on field 3 and 2, those outfield fences are nearly tipped over. So within a year or two, they really need to be replaced. Would be my recommendation on that. So holding off, I wouldn't recommend that, but.
Councilmember.
So from a comment standpoint, I think the risk is minimal. If we look at the history of the Lions Club in the city of Victoria, and it seems to me we need to repair the fences, so I don't think we need to reallocate.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Striegel?
No comments, thanks.
Councilmember Vogt?
I would not be in favor of deferring the fence, saying those fences look pretty bad. And for $50,000, we can handle it. As far as worrying about the Lions, I think they're like death taxes in the IRS. They're always going to be there. So not worried about the Lions.
Councilmember Gregory?
I'm willing to gamble on the Lions myself.
Okay. With that, I move that we approve item 4E that was originally on the consent agenda to replace the fencing as it was listed in the staff report. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So the fencing is approved. Secondly, for item 6B, can I have a motion to go ahead on the loan schedule? Can we have that up? Can I get that motion, please?
I guess I have a question on the loan schedule. There's going to be a capital campaign to collect monies to recoup this investment. Is that true? Or is that a rumor?
No, that would be in addition to what we're proposing.
So the monies that you're collecting in the capital campaign are going to be for additional spending or to pay back this loan?
Al, sorry, I need you at the microphone so we can capture you.
No, if we did a capital campaign, the first use of that would be to pay off the loan. But if that exceeds our expectation, we might look at some additional enhancements.
Can we get wording into the motion or the paperwork that says that the proceeds of the capital campaign will be used to pay off the principal, the loan principal?
Sure.
The other, I apologize to the council, I didn't mean to cut off discussion on this piece of it. Is there further comments on this loan? Councilmember Crowley?
No.
Councilmember Striegel?
No.
Councilmember Gregory?
I have nothing.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may, before you proceed to a motion, a second item of this request was whether the council is agreeable to allowing naming rights to the shelter to be offered as part of the capital campaign.
A good point. Let's try it again. Councilmember Crowley, comments on that point?
No concerns.
Councilmember Striegel?
No problems, thanks.
Councilmember Vogt?
I have, in general, no problems, but I think if there's naming rights, the city should have some kind of
Oversight.
oversight, good word. Because, Murphy's Law is always out there. We trust you we trust your judgment, but it would be better if the city had some involvement in the final name.
I would insist that there
Just
would be-
blessing it if nothing else.
Yeah, I would insist that there would be city involvement.
Okay.
Councilmember Gregory?
Nothing.
Okay, so I move that the city council authorize financing of Victoria Lions Shelter for a total cost of up to $345,000 to be repaid by the Victorian Lions over a 10-year period, with the two caveats that the capital campaign is used to accelerate repayment to the city, and secondly, that the city council has veto rights over the name that's selected and must approve the final name before it can actually be used. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank
I
you.
would just like to point out that there will be no taxpayer dollars. It'll be repaid full cost by the Lions.
Thank you.
Thank you. That great point.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item, Lori. I'm sorry, Ben. This is from Mount Olivet. Ben, if you would be so kind as to introduce this.
Yes, thank you. The request tonight before the council is very similar to a previous request made by Mount Olivet Church in 2014. As I had outlined in the staff report for the Planning Commission that's also attached as an item in your packet, there are some similarities but certainly some differences between the previous request that had been made seeking a conditional use permit in 2014, primarily due to the design at the time for what that addition would be, principally a two-story structure that would face Rolling Acres Road that exceeded the maximum height allowed within that district. That was the principal trigger for seeking a conditional use permit at that time. Since 2014, the church has not moved forward with any of the improvements as proposed, and their conditional use permit has expired. The church has used this time since the past several years to seek additional funding sources and to kind of right fit the addition for what their needs are. So the proposal before you tonight that I'll get into a little bit more detail here is not requiring of a conditional use permit. So you're not seeing that request here, simply looking for approval of site plan and building materials, much similar to what the council already acted on related to the Lions Park shelter. On the screen before you, or the packet before the council, is just an identification of where the site is. If you're familiar with the property that Mount Olivet Church has, there are currently 3 entrances into that property from Rolling Acres Road, which is right here on the slide, and be somewhat centrally located on the right side of the right image. The area in purple is the proposed addition to the existing church building. Also involved in this project, if you're familiar with the site, there is an existing administrative building that had been a former home converted into more office space when the church built out this campus. That administrative structure would be removed as part of these improvements and replaced by a 97-stall parking lot. The existing lot that serves the church building today will in some ways be reconfigured just to match grade with the new north lot. Also, as part of that work and what's been coordinated with Carver County's Public Works Department, is bringing up the grade slightly for what we'd call the middle entrance into the site. On the site plan that was included in your attachment, it's labeled as the south drive. Really allowing for the church to function independent of the residential uses that are on the southern half of their campus. So moving forward, they're looking at also aligning a new roadway that's on more the residential section to the rear of the new addition. This would provide fire access as well as deliveries to the new proposed addition. There was quite a bit of work done, and I apologize the aerial doesn't represent it, to evaluate the existing connections that are made between that middle access and the southern drive that surrounds the residential property. While the aerial does show that those remain, they will in fact be removed. That is called out on the site plan. The applicant has also worked with our fire department and public works to make some modifications to this existing south drive into the site, principally to get to our lift station and also to provide for that rear access for fire trucks. Some minimal improvements being made down there, removing a couple parking stalls that just made it very tight to get a fire truck in safely, and improving a radius within some of the internal circulation, again, to allow for those larger vehicles to get back to the rear part of the addition. This is the way the north portion of the site sits today, so the administrative building that I had pointed out would be removed. The existing tree line on the north side of the site would be retained, and that parking lot, as it was represented in 2014, would be installed in place of the current improvements around the existing administrative building. Just a little bit more of a close-up of what the final improvements being represented would look like. Again, the parking lot on the north being done first. The attempt to retain parking during construction. This will be a phased approach where the north lot is constructed with the administrative building being removed first, and subsequently looking for the addition and any modifications to the drive aisle, and the south lot serving the church facility would be done secondarily to having that parking lot in place. Also included in the site plan, so between the two phases, there is some landscaping going in as part of the improvements because it is phased two portions. The initial part being the parking lot and expansion of the stormwater pond facility that exists today, similar to what the council would have seen in discussions with the Waterford Landing project that's on Schutz Lake. Same rules apply to this facility where they need to meet stormwater management practices of Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. Would note the applicant has started the engagement with the Watershed District, but they have not gone through their permitting process. So before you tonight, one of the conditions is that they would still have to meet and acquire all of those permits through the Watershed District. South side of the site, a little bit more of a beautification and putting in more trees, replacing some of the removals that are done to get this rear access drive in. And then the elevations themselves. So the elevation facing Rolling Acres Road, you can see the existing peak of the church facility here today. About 1.5 stories elevation that would face Rolling Acres Road. And then on the back side, if you view this more of as a single-story walkout plan, 3 stories that face towards the lake, but are again screened from some of the existing vegetation. Side elevation just showing the change in topography, so the building does sit into the terrain of the site. And the only other thing that I would note that was provided by the applicant, we do not have physical building materials here for you tonight because the church is looking to replicate all of the materials that are currently in place on the building. So they did provide just some picture references, again, some stone metal cladding systems, and then glazing treatments very similar to what's in place on that church facility today being replicated in the addition itself. I won't go into great details of what the floor plan is, but those materials were included as part of the information for your consideration tonight. Principally looking at a sanctuary or a principal gathering place within the facility, some classroom spaces, some areas for rehearsals, and then also a fellowship hall being added among the 3 different floors within the proposed addition. At this point in time, I'd be happy to pause and take any questions. We do have representation from the church here, both the architect and the civil engineer, if you have any questions for them. Planning Commission reviewed this at their last meeting and did recommend approval. We did also have some communication with one of the residents, and I believe he had asked to speak tonight, so just wanted to remind you of that.
Thank you. Chris, it's finally your turn. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Chris Lovering. I live at 7100 Rolling Acres Road, Excelsior, Minnesota. It's just the postal code. I pay taxes in Victoria. Full disclosure, I'm also a city employee as a paid-on-call firefighter. So thank you for this time. And I had sent out an email on Friday, July 21st to council and to some of the city leadership, but just wanted to kind of summarize what I'd shared. First of all, the church has been a great neighbor, and we recognize its importance to the community, and we're not against the expansion of the church. I think anyone in this room that has directly adjacent to their property, the removal of an administrative building that appears to be like a residential building and it's replaced with a 97-space parking lot would have some concerns over car noise, lights from the parking lot, car lights, and just the general disruption of a large parking lot. So as a result, in 2014, we went through a long process with the city and the church, and we were able to come to agreement that the existing tree line, which is evergreens and a mix of old growth buckthorn that's being cut out as we speak, would remain, but the church would also do some enhancements in the landscaping and replace the existing chain link fence that runs on the north side of the property with a 6-foot opaque fence. So you can imagine when I learned that this project was going ahead, and I reached out to Ben at the Community Development Office to find out if that was still included, since it was part of the original conditional use permit and we went through a long process. I was disappointed to find that that wasn't included in the site plans and that the church wasn't going to accommodate that they'd agreed on in 2014. So I reached out to Tom McNally, the COO, on all of that. He indicated that where he did not have to, they still would honor that commitment from 2014. But I think we've all been involved in large projects where best intentions go awry based on change in leadership, change in budgets, and all sorts of things. And then I learned also at the latest Planning Commission meeting that codes have changed since 2014. So where in 2014 it required a 50-foot setback from any lot line for a parking lot, that doesn't exist anymore in the codes that were adopted in May of 2017. And the most that they have to do is 25 feet. Based on my estimates of the pictures that we received, it looks like it's probably about 30, 35 feet from the lot line where the parking lot would end up. So that really compels me that the need for the fence is really important. And where we're not going through a conditional use permit process like we did in 2014, based on my readings of the new city ordinances, there's an opportunity for the city council in number 7 of section 109-592 buffers and screening requirements. The city council could require a fence, which I don't think would be a much different process than the city council going through the conditional use permit process and requiring a fence to ensure that best intentions don't get left behind in this part of the process. So I humbly ask you to support us in this process of including that fence as per the city ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no objection from the council, I'd like Mount Olivet to come up and comment on Chris's comments about whether or not you'd honor that 2014 agreement. Please, if you would, state your name and your position for the record.
I'm Michael Brandt with the design team. Tom McNally is not able to be here tonight, but I represent him. He responded to Mr. Lovering's email and said that he would put the fence in per the 2014 CUP, even though it's not required per the current site plan.
So you're authorized to speak for him tonight? All right, so the church doesn't have any objections to honoring that agreement?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Crowley, questions?
No questions, just only comment would be, as part of a motion, we include what they've agreed to include.
Councilmember Striegel?
I support that statement. Also, I am curious, obviously, impervious surface coverage is requirements for managing stormwater have changed dramatically since the original facility was built, and now we're increasing that. And of course, we're right on the shore of Schutz Lake, which has been the subject of much discussion of this type. So I know it's touched on briefly, but I guess I just want to hear unambiguously that the new standards that will fully protect that lake are in place for this project.
Your comments are correct. So they are required to meet all of the updated requirements, like the site was essentially being built from scratch. So there is an enlargement of the existing stormwater facility, the addition of some filtration before the water would even leave that stormwater pond, all to keep the site up to date with the most current regulations through Minnehaha Creek Watershed District.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben.
Councilmember Vogt?
Two things. First of all, I agree the screening fence has to be part of the final solution. Stormwater pond, I don't recall anybody talking about the enhancements to the stormwater pond and all of this stuff. So could you tell us more about that? Because the impervious surface is way up there, and you're right on the lake.
So it might be slightly difficult to see, and if you go to, since you have paper copies, if you go to slide 10 in your packet, the phase 1 attachment kind of hits on what's changing. So the existing pond that's located, so left slide on that page, just highlights some of the grading that's being done. Basically, the pond's being pushed out to provide for additional capacity.
Excuse me, we don't have numbers on the slide, so
It's
oh, there we go. Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So additional capacity being made to the pond itself, and then a filtration system kind of near the outlet where that water would flow towards Schutz Lake being added as part of this project. This is slightly different in terms of it's a stormwater management facility that is not owned or operated by the city, but has been and continues to be operated by Mount Olivet Church. Meeting the new rules will just strengthen what they already have in terms of treatment for water that's leaving the site towards the lake.
I think slide 8 also shows a good aerial view of the current pond.
So area of enlargement is really strengthening the embankment here to provide additional capacity, and then there's a filtration basin near that existing outflow towards the lake.
Councilmember
If you'd
Vogt,
like a
more
more
questions?
detailed answer, I'm certain the project engineer could answer it much more eloquently than I have.
I'm good.
Okay. Councilmember Gregory?
Not much, other than this opaque fence. Exactly what is an opaque fence? Is there a color? Is there be a color preference? Just so that there's no surprises. What does an opaque fence look like?
What is an opaque?
What does an opaque fence? Is there a color?
Most of the time, people would refer to it as a privacy fence. So whether it was made of wood or some kind of aluminum or metal product, generally, even those metal products are done in a panelized construction that looks as if it were wood. I don't believe, because it wasn't included on this attachment, and even some of the 2014 references didn't have a specific treatment. Maybe that's part of the condition to coordinate with the neighbor if the owner doesn't have any specific preferences for what color that might be.
Okay. Did the owner have an idea of what this fence is going to look like? Okay.
How tall is the fence going to be?
6 feet, I believe, is what had been on previous approvals.
Council, any other comments, questions? Can we get the resolution up, please? Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution related to the approval of a site plan and building materials for an addition to Mount Olivet Lutheran Church located at 7200 Rolling Acres Road as proposed, with the amendment of the screening fence being added.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Next item, Ben, Whispering Hills, if you would, please.
bear with me just 1 second while I transition here. Thank you. The request before you tonight, most of the council should be familiar with this project's been under construction on the south side of Highway 5. Whispering Hills was initially proposed as a two-phase development. So what you'll see on the slide before you, if we just think of process, what have we already been through? Because this is a larger preliminary plat, you're seeing tonight a final plat, which is just a continuation of approvals that this project had secured in 2016, almost a year ago. To date, they have built out roughly half of it. Actually, some of the paving went down, I believe, late last week to finish up that initial phase. Sales have been really good, particularly in that villa product. So the developer and their building partner, M&I Homes, is very anxious to get this additional phase under construction to provide for additional lot availability. Within phase 2, or this second addition, you're looking at 35 additional villa or detached townhome sites, and 84 of the townhomes or row homes. Again, similar to what had been discussed about a year ago with the initial approvals, the developer has already dedicated the outlot and land for parkland dedication, as well as a lot of the outlots where the existing wetland in the center part of that site is located, as well as all the stormwater management. So really looking today, and I'm happy to come back to any of the information about the project, looking to solidify through final plat what had already been proposed in the preliminary plat approval secured for this project. Because there had been some changes in who the developer thought the building partner of those row homes had been, as noted in the staff report, there had been a minor amendment to that PUD that was approved by the council late last year when the townhome builder went from D.R. Horton to M&I Homes, the same builder that's building out those villas. Subsequent to that, with this second edition, there is a slight modification to the landscape plan just to represent that final building footprint of what those townhomes that M&I Homes is currently constructing in the first phase is doing in the second phase. Not a ton of difference if you were to compare them side by side. Still looking for a boulevard treatment and then a lot of landscaping enhancement in and amongst those different row homes to make them feel very similar to what had been done on the adjoining project of Madeline Creek. At this point in time, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Because you have the paper copy of the presentation, you'll note that the different color variations of those row homes, and just a reminder of what those villa product homes had looked like, are in your packet. But I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ben. Councilmember Crowley?
No comments.
Councilmember Striegel?
No comments.
Councilmember Vogt?
No comments.
Councilmember Gregory?
Nothing.
Okay, can we get the resolution up, please?
I'll make a motion, we approval of the resolution related to the approval of Whispering Hills Second Edition.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Okay, next item, Aaron, this is yours, 6E.
Mayor and Council, tonight we have some more ordinance updates. So we're still working through Section 109, which is our zoning and land use section of our city code. If you recall, we've recently adopted new residential and the plan unit development chapters, as well as the landscape and open space. As part of the updates, there's been some new language that's been introduced. So some of the changes tonight are reflecting the new language that's been introduced, as well as formatting similarly to how we're setting up the new revisions. And then just some revisions for clarity as well. So a little bit of reorganizing, moving some things around, but generally the information stays the same. So 3 sections tonight. Article 1 is in general. That's the home of most of our definitions in Section 109. So working through the residential chapters, we came up with some new terms that are reflected in the definitions. Article 1 was also formatted pretty heavily. Article 2 is the administration and enforcement. This information is going largely untouched. Generally, formatting was completed. And Article 3, again, is just working to support the residential districts and the planned unit development. So using some of that same language that we've used in the residential chapter, so it mirrors it well and gives us a more complete look as to what some of these words mean in our new city code. So again, Article 3 was also formatted. There were some revisions for clarity. The Planning Commission has worked really hard on this section. They've humored me with some really long conversations about what some people would think would be very boring topics, but it's been really appreciated. So we had a lengthy work discussion at our previous Planning Commission meeting. We held a public hearing. No one came forward with any concerns. It was also published in the newspaper. Based off the work that the Planning Commission has done, they have recommended approval to come to the City Council for Section 109, Articles 1, 2, and 3. As we continue to move through updates of the City Code, we'll continue to bring some parts of Section 109 until it's a complete chapter and we can move forward using it in entirety.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Council comments? Councilman Corley, I'm sorry. Councilmember Strugel?
No comments.
Councilmember Volt?
No comments.
Councilmember Gregory?
Nothing.
Can I have a motion then, please?
Make a motion to adopt ordinance number 420, amending section 109 of the city's zoning ordinance by repealing and replacing in their entirety Article 1 in general, Article 2 administration and enforcement, and Article 3 zoning districts.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Summary publication, can I get a motion on this?
I move we approve a resolution authorizing the summary publication of ordinance number 420.
Is there a second?
Second motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously also. Next item. These are the newly added items. The first one, 7A, is going to be the general concept. Councilmember Crowley, would you like to begin the discussion?
Yeah, I guess it might serve us well to start with having the city manager actually read the letter, because it outlines, while it is very specific, it outlines the discussion from a conceptual standpoint.
Which letter is this?
Your letter to the Attorney General.
That needs to be reserved for 7B. That's the letter specific to the legal fees and needs to be discussed under the legal fees topic.
The letter references from a conceptual standpoint an action taken unilaterally by a member of the council member, or by a member of this council, that is in specific, it is counter to a specific action that council has previously approved. So I asked for it to be read from the standpoint to demonstrate the conceptual outline that I've just defined.
Lori, when the adopted agenda was done, we added two items, 7A, general concept, 7B, the specific letter. I have no problems talking about a general concept of council members doing letters. I do object to 7B being read in under 7A.
All right, so let's do
you?
it this way. Let's talk conceptually.
Fair enough.
And before I do that, I'd like to ask the attorney, does he agree with that, or can we read the letter?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I don't agree with that. I mean, as you've illustrated tonight, Mayor, it's your decision whether you have a conflict or not. I mean, I've expressed my view on your conflict. You reject that view, or you've got another opinion about that, and you've decided that you're going to participate on the reimbursement issue. It's not for you to say that the council member Crowley and Striegel can't participate on this issue and read the letter if they want to. I mean,
that's fine. Then it's going to be read anyways. Let's go ahead. Lori, if you would read the issue, I remove my objection.
Just to clarify, I'm reading your letter to the Attorney General?
Correct.
Okay. So before I read it, this letter is not currently posted in the packet, but we will include it since it was added as an agenda item. And the city clerk, it is a requirement with open meeting law that one copy of anything that we refer to be available to the public, and the city clerk does have a copy that's available to inspect. The letter is addressed to the Honorable Lori Swenson, Office of the Minnesota Attorney General, and Deputy Attorney General Christy Eller at the Office of the Minnesota Attorney General. Subject line, request for opinion regarding reimbursement of legal fees in open meeting law litigation. Dear Attorney General Lori Swanson and Deputy Attorney General Christine Eller. Yesterday, July 19th, City Attorney Robert J. Vos submitted a letter with the same subject line as above to your offices. I had planned to address this issue on July 10th, but will now be addressing it at the July 24th council meeting. This topic is known to Mr. Vos to be on the upcoming July 24th council meeting for discussion. As the mayor of the city of Victoria, I am requesting you take no action on his letter. Next paragraph. It should be noted that a defendant in the OML case had this topic moved from the July 10th meeting when the council originally had this on the agenda for discussion. The discussion was delayed because Mr. Vos was not in attendance on July 10th due to a conflict, even though this Victoria council meetings are known to Mr. Vos months in advance. Third paragraph. Finally, Professor Richard W. Painter has provided Victoria residents an expert opinion regarding conflicts of interest that exist with both Mr. Vos and certain members of the City Council. Professor Painter states in part, Mr. Vos should not have participated in advising the City Council or any city employee as to whether or not defendants' legal costs in connection with this matter should be paid by the city, End quote. I've attached a copy of Professor Painter's opinion for your reference. Respectfully submitted, Thomas C. Funk, Mayor, City of Victoria, with a note that says, sent by electronic mail to christy.eller@ag.state.mn.us and by U.S. mail to each address. End of letter.
Thank you. I guess my concern is, conceptually, there was an agreement by non-conflicted council members to pursue an attorney general's opinion. There were protracted delays to get that letter out on behalf of the plaintiffs. That letter was completed finally last week and sent, and now we have a unilateral action by a council member directing that no action be taken on an item that council non-conflicted members had previously approved and directed staff to pursue. And so the conceptual challenge I have is the unilateral action by any member of this board going against a previous motion that has been approved. What are the ramifications of that? I don't think it's legal, but I would like the attorney's opinion, and how do we stop it?
Well, Mayor and Council, again, ramifications. I think I agree with your characterization of sort of what went on. I mean, our understanding, Lori's understanding and mine from the two non-conflicted council members was that we were to work with the resident group, that a number of them are in the room tonight. We did that. We prepared a opinion request and we submitted it. We understood that to be the direction we were to take. I don't know what authority any single member of the council has to overrule that or withdraw that or change that. So ramifications, I think, are that the Attorney General may do what the mayor requested, and you will have wasted several $1,000s in legal fees and time.
Conceptually,
that's the obvious ramification.
Conceptually, I would want the council's direction pursued and not be overridden by an individual member's desires. Whether they're right or not, the council had ruled, and the action should, the individual's request, in my opinion, should be nullified. Reversing the situation, my opinion.
Okay, I object because he's trying to influence council members on an issue with.
I'm not trying to influence a council member. I have the floor. Excuse me. If this was a staff member that had pursued this action, my suspicions are that their tenure would be under reconsideration. I mean, this is a very serious offense for an individual to go around the council, regardless, to go around the council's directed orders. And the precedent is unbelievable. I yield the floor.
Okay, I'm going to respond. I disagree with most of that characterization of what's been going on. And I think it'll be clear to the public once we get into the legal fee discussions. You'll have a full understanding from my perspective and why that letter was done. But I'm not going to address that in this general concept. It's specific to the legal fees. That letter was written for that purpose, and I'll address it at that time. Council, is there other questions on or discussion on the general concept?
Please. Again, I think conceptually speaking, we each have one vote, and so when there's an issue that is decided by a legal vote, I'm very much confused how any one individual can override that. I don't care whether it's a vote of the full council or a limited vote due to recusals. It would seem to me that any direction by any one individual should be ignored because it's contrary to the vote of the council, which sets the direction. And so it just boggles me that, I mean, to me, it feels like this is a place where you step in and say, that should be ignored.
Yeah, Mayor and council members, again, not going to duck and cover. The third time I've said that. The mayor has declined at this point to explain why he sent the letter. I am asking the same question. Our understanding at my level and Lori's level was that we were supposed to do this, request an AG opinion about a number of issues, most prominently what authority the manager has over the reimbursement issue. We did that. I don't know what authority the mayor has to revoke that or retract that or ask that it not be responded to. It doesn't appear to me that he does have that authority, but I'm going to wait to hear what the explanation is. I guess I thought, Mayor, that this was the time for that. I thought this was the time we're talking generally about whether individual council members, yourself or anybody else, can do this, can write, take a position on behalf of the city that would appear to be contrary to the city's position. And so I think this is the time to do that, but if you don't want to do that now, it's on my place to tell you when you're supposed to explain yourself. But I don't know, council member. I don't know the answer to your question. You cannot write a letter on behalf of the city of Victoria that's contrary to the city's position. So you don't have that authority.
Thank you. And to finish that point then, what is the point of a recusal? If you, well, I didn't get the outcome I wanted, so I'm just going to go up and over or around. I mean, it seems to me like it makes a mockery of the entire process.
Well, Mayor and council member, no, I mean, I'm not sure that's the best example. The example I am thinking of is if you're on the losing side of a vote, you haven't recused, there's no conflict issue at all. If a vote goes down 3-2, you don't get to write a dissenting opinion. The mayor or a council member can't write a letter to a state agency saying, that was a bad decision, I don't agree with it, don't act on it, don't pursue it, whatever. That isn't the way it works. So,
Councilmember Vogt.
Well, first of all, again, I'm speaking from a citizen outside of the open meeting law dispute situation. I personally look at this as the people that run this city are 5 members of the city council and the city manager. And the mayor doesn't run the city. The mayor can be very involved with the city, but the mayor has 1 vote on the city council. So it's 5 people acting together and the city manager that run this city. The mayor does not run this city. So as an individual, not a lawyer, not versed in deep education on civic proceedings, it seems inconceivable to me that the mayor would, after he endorsed sending a letter to the AG, that letter was sent, and then to write his own letter with titling it mayor, sending it to undermine the AG letter that had been sent by staff I just can't. It's got to be not only improper, it's probably illegal, and it's highly improper at the very least. I'm flabbergasted that this happened. I'm flabbergasted. I'm ashamed that this happened. The mayor just circumvented the city council and the city staff and the city lawyer. That's all I can't, I'm repeating myself.
Councilmember Gregory.
Councilmember Vogt and I, on April 24th, came to an agreement that we were going to seek an opinion from the Attorney General. It's been working on for 3 months. I don't know if there's a time or place, but I'll throw it out there anyways. I don't even think anything's happening now. But I'll take a little bit of credit for why this letter got sent in about a week and a half ago. The city manager and I met, and because this issue was going to come up at this council meeting, I thought it would be helpful to move this discussion along. It had been going on for long enough, and at some point I thought we need to agree to disagree and send it through some unfortunate circumstances and some miscommunication, and I think Mr. Goulart's going to speak to that. It got sent in. Okay, so with that said, I don't know. I mean, I was hoping that with the time and money that we spent to put this together, whether it was a complete letter or not, at least I thought we could get the AG to weigh in. Under the circumstances, I'm assuming that's highly doubtful. And that's
Mr. Mayor, question.
Go ahead.
How much money have we spent on this, from a legal fee standpoint, on this now letter that, conceptually, on a letter that we may not receive a response to?
I have no idea. Lori?
We've calculated we've spent about $3,000 specifically preparing the request for opinion.
Council, other comments? Okay. We can move on to the specific letter. Given the discussion that just occurred, I'll include that as part of the legal fees discussion.
Just as an objection, I'd like to object that the mayor should be joining us in recusal.
So noted.
I'm recusing myself.
Okay. Lori, if you provide a short introduction.
I'm sorry, Mayor, you didn't ask me to give a staff report for legal fees. I added it at your direction. If you give me a little bit more to go, I'll try to bring it.
That's all right. Let's do this. A number of things have been said tonight, mischaracterizations of my position and why I've changed. I'll get into that a little bit later as we present more information about what's occurred and at what time. But before we do that, I'd like to go back to when this originally was going to come up. There's a memo dated 10 July, legal fees for open meeting litigation. Lori, do you know the memo I'm talking about? It's in the packet, I believe.
It's included in the packet this evening, yes.
Right. So in here, one of the things that's in the memo is, in fact, it states, and I quote, "The city is paying legal costs on behalf of council members Striegel and Crowley." So the question I have is it just for those two defendants, or is it for all four defendants?
The city is only paying legal costs on behalf of the council members Striegel and Crowley, the current sitting council members.
Okay. It also goes on to say the firm has agreed to a not-to-exceed amount of $25,000, filing fees, et cetera, in order to represent the defendants through the completion of the appeal process. Is there a written contract with the city on this? What is this agreement? Is it between the city and this law firm?
It is not. It is between the council members Striegel and Crowley. I am representing the details of that agreement.
Okay. On the summary document that was provided in the 10 July council meeting, on there on the invoice, it says, and about halfway down, it says Funk et al. Versus Lana Bassa et al. That seems to imply that these legal bills are for all four defendants. So I'm trying to understand what's the disconnect here between the memo that says it's for two, but yet the invoice it lists all four of the defendants.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, you're referring to what's on the invoice from the firm that's represented?
Correct. I'm referring specifically to the Anthony Osland invoice that's dated 31 May 2017. And on that, it actually lists all four of the council members.
Well, they're engaged in a joint defense, so I mean, the reality is it's a joint defense. The city's entitlement right to reimburse legal fees runs to sitting council members, is my view. But it's a joint defense, so I mean, there's no distinction between representing two of them or four of them. They have identical defenses. So there isn't four attorneys representing four defendants. There's one attorney representing four defendants in a joint defense.
So I'm just curious, wouldn't the staff report list all four of them? Because in essence, you're defending all four of them.
Yeah, Mayor, I don't know what I'm not sure why doesn't the staff report list all four defendants?
Correct.
I don't know.
I mean, that's what the invoice says. So, all right, well, all right. Who provided this invoice to the city and how was it delivered?
It was delivered via U.S. mail from Anthony Osland.
To you?
Correct.
Can you tell me who you shared this with and when? Roughly.
I prepared this cover memo and inserted it in the council packet.
Did you go through the details with, at this time when this came in, you and I met with Bob the morning after this first came out. This came out, let's see, the meeting was the 10th, so 9, 8, 7. The afternoon of the 6th, we met the morning of the 7th, Friday, July 7th. Is that correct? Right?
I believe so.
At that time, I believe you told me that you had had this for about 6 weeks. When you first received that?
Mayor, that's not correct.
Okay.
I did
Correct me
not
then.
say that I had it for 6 weeks. There is a date stamp on the cover of what you're looking at. Would have represented approximately when it came to city offices, which is not 6 weeks.
Okay, so it's dated May 31.
The invoice is dated May 31. There is a date stamp. Would you mind looking at that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I found it. June 23rd. So that's when it arrived in the city?
Sometime around then, yes.
Okay, thank you. Did you share that with the two council members to my right who were declared not conflicted at that time?
I did not share it with any of the council members until I added it to the packet and alerted you as an entire council by email.
So Mayor, let me just interrupt if I may. May I ask a question?
Sure.
So you've declared that you don't have a conflict. Now, you've said for months now that you have a conflict. You've decided you don't. You now seem to be cross-examining the city staff about facts related to reimbursement. It creates the perception, again, that you're acting as a plaintiff in the litigation, not as the mayor. Why are you...
I'm trying to understand, fair question, I'm trying to understand what I'm doing and just understand this detail about when it came in and how it was handled. That's all I'm trying to get on the record. I think the public has a right to know what was going on behind the scenes, and it also pertains to the conversations that will come up later. So there's only one more question that I have related to this. On here, there's a trust balance that says $10,000. And I'm curious, did the city pay this? Do you know anything about this $10,000, that there's a trust balance of some sort?
The city has not made any payments to Anthony Osland to date.
All right, so you don't know what this is or where it came from?
Do not.
Okay. Do you know if the defendants paid a deposit?
No.
If you don't, okay. Fine. So that clarified a couple of things for me. Thank you. At this point, there's been a lot of discussion earlier about this letter to the Attorney General and what's transpired over that. What I'd like to do is ask the council members, Vogt and Gregory, to provide their perspective as far as what was supposed to happen, specifically whether or not that letter should have been sent before the residents who were being represented primarily by Mr. Goulart. I want them to comment specifically on why that letter was sent before those residents signed off on that letter, and if they have any thoughts on that. Councilmember Vogt?
I'm not sure what you're asking me. Could you... I didn't understand the question.
Okay, fair enough. That letter...
We're talking about the AG letter or
correct.
Your letter?
No, this is the letter that was... I'm sorry. This was the letter that was submitted to the Attorney General.
Okay, Attorney General letter, which was submitted from these offices.
Correct. And in that letter, if I understand what you and Councilmember Gregory originally said, is that letter needed to include the input of the residents, and Mr. Goulart was leading that for the residents. Was that your understanding, or am I misinterpreting what you intended to do when you authorized the creation of the letter?
Well, I think we talked about the fact that that input should be received from the residents. It's a matter of judgment as to what the city attorney and the city manager do with that input in formulating the letter, because the letter is still coming from the city of Victoria. So as I understood it, they did incorporate quite a bit of the input from the residents, but not all of it, because they didn't agree with that input that they did not include. I don't know the specifics of that, other than that doesn't sound improper to me. That sounds proper. The letter is coming from the city, and it has to represent what the city attorney and the city manager really believe.
Okay, anything further? Thank you. Councilmember Gregory, would you comment, please?
Well, the direction was that we were going to seek an opinion, and they were going to put this letter together. It was going to be from our city attorney and gathering input from the residents. It was broad. There was nothing specific that each party had to sign off. It's unfortunate. Again, they were meeting for weeks. It had been going on for nearly 3 months, and it's just unfortunate that it got pushed forward with bad communication and sent in. But it's here or there, and I don't know. Can't pull it back, but
I don't really perceive it to be bad communication. It was open, repeated communication from what I saw from my vantage point of looking at communications through emails and so on. And it looked like it was a very difficult and complicated process that took a good long while. And I don't think I thought the city did the best it could and sent in something that represents what we intended to show what our position is, and get a reading from the Attorney General on this whole case.
Yep, go ahead.
Just as to where we didn't have agreement, I mean, I think you're right as to the miscommunication piece, as you know, because you've seen copies of it. Lori attempted to arrange a meeting for several days and didn't get a response at all, no response at all, and ultimately we decided we wanted to put in the letter as it was. Where we had disagreement with the residents, as Councilmember Vogt, you're exactly right. We had two very, I thought, I won't characterize it for them, cordial meetings that were pretty open and honest, and we covered a lot of ground. We incorporated a great deal of input from the resident group. We made a lot of changes to what I had originally drafted. We didn't agree on one, I think, very significant issue to the residents. And I don't know how deep into the weeds you want to get on it, but I will just tell you that on that issue, the residents wanted to include several pages of factual background that I think would have been disputed. I don't think that all of the parties that care about the facts would have agreed with the facts that the residents were suggesting we include, number one. Number two, the facts and the question that was related to those facts that they wanted to ask were inappropriate, that they were not appropriate for an Attorney General's opinion, and were irrelevant to the questions that we were asking. Those are my legal judgments. That's what you pay me to do, is to make legal judgments about things like what we should ask the Attorney General for. I will tell you, because we're making a public record of it, Mayor, our letter is fairly long. It includes a lot of facts. It would include a copy, did include a copy of the court's order in the open meeting law case, which in and of itself has dozens of pages of facts. And we had a number of questions related to this open meeting law reimbursement issue. So we believed, Lori and I believed, that we had really, in good faith, maybe beyond good faith, we'd actually worked pretty hard to satisfy what we needed to get on behalf of the two of you, and to satisfy the interests of the residents led by Ken, Mr. Goulart. And we had taken a swing at that. We did not include a certain set of facts and a certain question that Again, my judgment, irrelevant, would not have led to an answer from the Attorney General, and quite candidly would have probably submarined getting an answer from the Attorney General. Not a kind of topic that the Attorney General is going to weigh in on. Again, I've read hundreds of these opinions. My firm has prepared dozens and dozens of these requests. I know what I'm talking about when it comes to Attorney General's requests, and that was my professional judgment. I think that's what you expect me to do. So,
And just to be clear, my point on the miscommunication wasn't in developing the letter. It was miscommunication in the urgency on sending it, which I put in motion. That's the part that got miscommunicated.
So I want to clarify a point. Bob, when we were talking on that Friday before the 10 July, when this was originally scheduled to be on the council, I believe you already stated even tonight that it was pretty clear to you that I was going to reverse my self-imposed conflict and then therefore participate in the legal discussion. Is that correct?
no. You said during that call, you recorded the call, so if you
Yes.
want to play the tape, you can. You said that you had consulted with an experienced municipal attorney, and then you confirmed that in an email to me. And you had had some questions raised in your mind about the Lenz case, the factors under the Lenz case, and you were taking a new look at it. I specifically asked you if you would share that opinion. You said you would not. I asked you if you were going to change your mind at the council meeting. You declined to answer that question. And so, no, I did not know what you were going to do.
All right. Did you suspect that I was going to?
I did suspect that, yeah.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to ask Mr. Goulart if you would please provide your input as far as this sequence of events. Please state your name and your address for the record.
Yeah, Ken Goulart, 7970 Acorn Circle. That's here in Victoria. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Tonight, I think there's a lot of different things happening, and there's a lot of questions being asked out there. I do have some material I'll be happy to share and provide that. Really, there's some bigger questions that I think have been ongoing, and they're ongoing for a while. And I agree, we worked hard. We did. We put a lot of effort in. There was a lot of good communication. And just disagreement as to the timing, disagreement as to what the final content in the version that was submitted versus some of the additional positions we had. One of the reasons I wanted to talk tonight is really there's a lot of concern about maybe some of the position of Kennedy Engraving and some potential conflict of interest with that firm. And I think it's something that has been undertone for a while here, and I think it's something we wanted to get into. I know there's a lot of concern, and there's a lot of public interest in what's going on in our community and what's in the best interest of our community, and we know that, and we're concerned about it too. We live here. We have a very important interest as well in it. As with any issue of public interest, again, I think everyone needs to understand all the facts and dive into what's really going on and have both sides of the story so they can make an informed decision. I think it's also important that irrespective of where your opinion is, you have to understand that there's going to be differing opinions. And I think we can all agree that disparagement or attacking one side or the other because of the opinions that they're taking is very not productive for our community. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind. There seems to be a lot of messaging out there and circling around, and it's unfortunate because this is a legitimate dispute and it's a legitimate discussion inside of our community and our state. With respect to the case itself, rulings by the judge during the litigation and during the findings of fact during the open meeting law left unresolved significant issues regarding the open meeting law. It's important to our community, it's important to our state. The League of Minnesota Cities and the Association of Minnesota Counties found these issues important enough that they filed amicus briefs during this appeals process. These are significant issues, and these are very large organizations representing all the counties, all the cities, and they're coming in as well on these issues. The city attorney of Victoria, Mr. Vos, also has indicated that he considers some of these issues significantly of interest to the city. And has advised the city manager at this point that the taxpayers of our city should be burdened with the defense of the defendants in this matter, because these are significant issues that are important to the city, and that is a mechanism that is there. Now, that's my interpretation. If I'm incorrect, I apologize, but that's kind of the basic understanding that I have. The city attorney has also advised the city manager that she has the authority to make payments to reimburse these fees without the consent or the approval of the city council. It's another question that we have, and I think it's one of the things we were driving towards with the Attorney General opinion, and we were trying to get there. I, along with other citizens in the community, disagree with these opinions, and I've repeatedly voiced that opinion. I've talked with Lori. I've urged Lori to maybe disregard that or consider what's in the best interest from an alternative point of view, which is don't pay them. Let's get an absolute decision. Let's get some clarity. And that's a choice. Given the option of paying or not paying in this situation, I believe it's the obligation of the city manager not to pay until there's an absolute, concrete, you have to pay, until that obligation is clear. And I don't think it's clear. I think the city attorney has made an opinion. He's provided some advice. But if you asked him if he was absolutely certain, I don't know what his answer would be. But I think there's very differing opinions when you look at the case law and you look at what's going on. Throughout the ongoing legal actions, there have been significant actions taken and facts discovered that have brought about questions as to whether Kennedy and Graven have a potential conflict of interest with respect to this issue, to the point that there's questions whether or not Kennedy and Graven should recuse itself from commenting or providing advice to the city in the matter. These concerns have been raised and they have been rejected. During the open meeting law litigation, the defendants through their legal team and as individuals have repeatedly claimed that the advice provided by Kennedy and Graven contributed to or outright caused them to commit multiple open meeting law violations. These claims have been made both at trial and in the appeals process. So they have stated that they believe there was bad advice provided them that resulted in violations. It is clear that these claims could form the basis of a legal malpractice claim against Kennedy and Graven, thus calling into the question of potential competing interests by all the parties in their respective roles. The public record shows that once the appeal of the litigation was filed, city staff and then city council members began preparing to have the city pay for the cost of ongoing legal fees. Despite claims against Kennedy and Graven at trial, the city council, including the 4 defendants that had a direct financial interest in the outcome, requested Kennedy and Graven to provide advice regarding the obligation of the city to pay their legal fees. As a result of this request, during the May 9, 2016 City Council meeting, Attorney Vos, without expressing concern regarding the potential conflicts of interest, expressed an opinion that under Minnesota Statute 466, the city had an absolute obligation to pay. Despite having time to research, Attorney Vos was incorrect, in fact, that Statute 466 obligated the city to pay in this particular instance with respect to open meeting law violations. Mr. Vos advised the city manager that she also had the authority to make payments of the attorney's fees under 13D, and such payments did not require approval of the city. That was a change from the original advice of 466, but not altering the conclusion that the city was obligated to pay. Mr. Vos's opinion was again questioned. Statute 13D of the Minnesota statutes clearly states that a city may not pay, or may pay, but is not obligated to pay attorney's fees in the case of an open meeting law. The language is important because the word may is a very discretionary word that would indicate a policy decision of a city council to decide whether or not they would execute that right or that option to pay. With respect to the city manager's payment authority, there is again a dispute with respect to the advice proffered by Mr. Vos. State statute limits the authority of a manager to make payments without council approval to $20,000. In addition, the city has purchasing policy that further reduces payment authority to $10,000. Despite these limitations, Mr. Vos continues to steadfastly conclude that the restrictions do not apply, in this instance. Mr. Vos has also continued to advise the city has a significant interest in the appeal and therefore obligated to pay the defense costs of the named council members. The logic of this advice also appears flawed based on our assessment. The significant issues that form the basis of Mr. Vos's opinion are the same issues that are being represented by the League of Minnesota Cities in the appellate case. Simply put, the issues that are significant to the city are being represented through its membership in the league and the amicus brief filed on its behalf. It's unclear why we would have to pay multiple times to have the same representation on the same significant legal issues. Since the original request for reimbursement of fees, Mr. Vos has altered the basis of his advice, but never faltered on the underlying premise that the city is absolutely obligated to pay. This conclusion, however, is even contrary to another attorney in his own firm of Kennedy and Graven. In 2003, attorney Charles L. Lefevre append to a different client that a city has no obligation to pay legal defenses under 13D. I have a copy of that letter. Significantly different than the advice the city is receiving. Faced with all the questions and concerns on April 24, 2017, at the city council meeting, the city manager and city attorney did present questions to unconflicted members that had declared themselves unconflicted. Councilmember Vogt and Gregory requested that the city manager seek an attorney general opinion regarding the payment of fees, and included as part of that request that they work with concerned citizens regarding the language for that opinion. We had several exchanges in meetings with the city manager and city attorney regarding this submission, and as previously mentioned, very fruitful. We had a lot of good conversations, a lot of hard work was put in. The question that underlined those discussions, though, was predominantly a never-changing idea that there was an absolute obligation to pay, and that the intent of the letter was to identify a way to affirm that absolute obligation. The original questions proposed, the original draft submitted, were very much skewed towards figuring out a way to make the payments happen, as opposed to asking the general question, is there an obligation? Should we pay? And that is, again, a question or a disagreement that we were having very early on. At the July 10th council meeting, the city manager, based in part on advice from Mr. Vos and without an opinion from the Attorney General, announced plans to pay the new legal fees submitted to the city. Upon learning of the city manager's intent, I reached out to the city manager to refrain from spending more tax dollars until an unbiased opinion as to the city's obligation to pay was provided either by the Attorney General or even a court of law. There is a mechanism. Subsequently, on July 19th, the city attorney issued a letter to the Attorney General requesting an advisory opinion. This letter was submitted without consent or agreement of concerned citizens and the city staff that the city staff was directed to work with. Unfortunately, included in that final submission was the removal of language that they were supposed to be working with city staff. It was a little bit of a change in the letter. I'm not sure why it was removed. It was in the original drafts, and it kind of just vanished, I'm sure, as part of the final editing. But the point being, we just didn't have time, we just didn't have full agreement, and we understand the position that's been taken or expressed today. I do want to fully acknowledge that there was a series of emails to me that went unresponded to. The city manager properly deduced and indicated in the emails that I was traveling and I wasn't paying attention to that particular email. But I'd also point out that there was no effort to reach out with a cell phone call either, and that would have gotten my attention. On the evening of July 19th, after the submission, I promptly notified the city of our objections and requested that they withdraw the submission so we could finalize it and reach a conclusion of what we had done collectively. On July 20th, I was informed that there was no mechanism for withdrawing that letter, and that they would not seek a withdrawal. I have spoken with the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, and I'm not sure that why there wouldn't have been an effort to suspend that, but that was what I was told, that it would not be withdrawn and that there was no mechanism. Given the contrary submission and lack of agreement, I did raise objections with the Attorney General as well, indicating that we felt that there was more information that needed to be provided and that we disagreed with what was finally submitted. We were told at the time that there wasn't a mechanism for us to do that, but apparently there is, because we were able to promptly submit that. This conclusion to this process that we undertook over the last several months was particularly disheartening, because we all had time and effort into this. There were tax dollars into this. And we were all working towards acceptable language, and we were all had a desire to get an opinion from an unbiased source such as the Attorney General. The decision to unilaterally submit it without having that final input, for the most part, derailed the opportunity, and we've lost it, or may have lost it. Starting when the defendants first raised their claims that Kennedy and Graven's advice contributed to open meeting law violations, lingering questions have remained regarding the potential conflict of interest of Kennedy and Graven throughout the advisement to the city. Mr. Vos has stated that he sought an independent assessment of potential conflict of Kennedy and Graven from the Minnesota Lawyers Professional Responsibility Board, hopefully I got that right, and has been informed by the board that no conflict exists. A review of the process, unfortunately, shows that the requesting attorney controls the question asked, the facts submitted, and no written opinion is provided, just an oral opinion sent back to the individual making the request. In essence, there's no independent way to verify what the opinion is, how it was formulated, and anything else surrounding the advice that is being proffered out. Given the lack of clarity, we as a group of citizens requested a third-party expert opinion from a leading ethics lawyer, Professor Richard Painter from the University of Minnesota. He's been in a lot of press coverage lately. He has been extremely active on the national scene in the current situation. Professor Painter was provided and reviewed documents and data related to the concerns being raised. A list of those materials and documents are attached to his professional opinion that's been submitted to the city and provided to the City Council. And as noted, Professor Painter raised serious concerns regarding the potential conflict of interest of Kennedy and Graven. At this point, from our perspective, to listen to a statement that there is a guaranteed conflict with somebody, but no acknowledgement of their own potential conflict, is pretty disheartening from my perspective, and that's my personal opinion. I think it's important for the unconflicted city council members to consider this potential conflict of interest and make their own decision whether or not there should be an outside firm or a third party that can provide unbiased or unconflicted advice or any potential conflict of advice. That's what we were trying to do with the Attorney General. That's where we were driving. That got short-circuited, and it is really frustrating, to be honest with you. But that's what I want to put in front of you folks. That's what I want you folks to be considering, that we need to get to the right position for our city. We need to get these questions answered. Do we have an obligation to pay? Not how to pay it. Do we have an obligation to pay? And if we do have an obligation to pay, how do we make that happen? And I don't think the first question's been answered, and I don't think we have the right questions out there. Thank you.
Council, any questions for Mr. Gulak?
At this point, I don't have any. I heard what he said.
Councilmember Gregory?
Other than the Attorney General, is there any other mechanism that you can think of that might get us that unbiased opinion?
Well, I think there's several mechanisms, in my opinion. We know from a 1992 Attorney General opinion, and I think Attorney Voss is aware of it as well, there was an indication that declaratory relief through the court is one mechanism. You can have a court opinion rendered. And obviously, I would let Attorney Vos speak to that, but that is definitely one where you would have a conclusive, independent trier of fact give you a conclusive opinion. Now, whether or not that's a viable avenue, I'm not capable of saying. Alternatively, maybe putting a third party or an independent law firm in to give a different opinion or a second opinion. Sometimes your professionals, you might want to go get a second opinion. You might get a third opinion. And in this instance, given the potential or the perception of a potential conflict, I think that's a fair mechanism that would at least allow us to get a separate, unbiased, or just another opinion as to some of the advice that's been coming to the city on this particular topic. I'm not meaning to impugn Mr. Vos. I'm just questioning, based on the facts that we have and based on the information and based on Professor Painter and his expert opinion, there's concerns.
Mayor?
Uh,
I'm perplexed about a few things. Can I ask a question, Mr. Goulart?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess I'd like to touch on a few things, but I want to confine it to asking Mr. Goulart a question. I mean, you've made the point now a couple of times in your presentation that essentially what you're looking for is you believe I or my firm or both of us may have a conflict of interest, and you don't trust the legal advice that we've given, and so you want the city to get a more definite opinion. What the two non-conflicted council members directed was getting a second opinion. The Attorney General would have given a second opinion to my advice from the most authoritative attorney in the state of Minnesota on this question. And so that's what they directed to do, and obviously I didn't interfere with that. I tried to facilitate making that happen. I thought that was a very good idea, and I was supportive of it. We prepared that, and I guess I've heard you now go on for a fair amount of time here. I didn't understand where we fell apart in our request, number one. I mean, apparently our request was so far off the mark that you saw fit through the mayor to ask the AG not even to answer the questions, although you say you want a second opinion. So I don't.
Wait a second. He did not ask me to send the letter to the AG. Okay. I did that independently.
That happened simultaneous with them deciding that the request was not appropriate. So I'm not sure where we got separated just on what was being asked. But I guess of greater concern now that you've said it is you've apparently talked to the Attorney General and submitted, you said, what you wanted to submit. So why don't we agree now then that you've submitted what you need to submit to make the record complete? I'm not going to object to that. If the Attorney General has received from you information that you wanted to provide, great. We all agree, regardless which side you're on in this debate, that getting an opinion that we all rely on would be a very good thing. Regardless which side of the litigation you're on, which side of the council you're sitting on, whether you're sitting on one side of the audience here or the other in the city of Victoria, everyone would like some clarification. That's what Lori and I have attempted to do. So why was the request we made so far off the mark, and why haven't you corrected that by talking to the AG and submitting what you wanted to submit?
Yeah, first, you did mischaracterize several of the statements that I made. We did not submit our version of a submission. We objected to yours. As you've properly pointed out to us throughout the process, is it 408? Whichever statutory clause you've submitted your request, only attorneys for municipalities or for other cities can use that statutory language to submit a request for an advisory opinion. So to the extent that you're indicating we submitted a request, obviously we cannot, because we do not meet the statutory requirements for that submittal process.
Well, you just said up there a minute ago that I said just that you would not be able to submit information to the Attorney General, and then you said that was not correct. You said that you could do that. So
no, we were capable of submitting information into them to raise questions, but we couldn't submit a request for an advisory opinion. So semantically, we can kind of go through that process, but the simple reality is that mechanism is a mechanism left to the city council and to the city and to that level of city attorneys making those requests. That was not our intent. Our intent was to reach a final language and a joint conclusion that I think everybody was going to decide was acceptable. The mechanism short-circuited. Just yes, I was traveling. Yes. Emails were sent. Typically, in my world, non-responsive emails aren't approval. They're need any follow-up. And I think that was, and Lori and I had a good conversation actually on that following Thursday. With respect to that mechanism, I don't disagree. We thought we had a good mechanism. There was some action there. We were trying to get there. It got short-circuited and suddenly accelerated. And the challenge we were running into was we were sitting kind of in a status quo, working through the language, and we were trying to get there. We didn't have a time schedule set. We didn't start with a time schedule from day one. So urgency was a question of what just happened. It was just boom, 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 and here we go. Again, I don't disagree with you. I mean, if we want to reset the clock and huddle back up and then resubmit, I don't disagree of trying to get an attorney general opinion. It's definitely an option. Otherwise, there's a court. Back to your question, a court can render an opinion, or an independent third-party attorney could potentially come in and provide an alternative opinion. So I think there's plenty of options available. I think what we would love to see is at least you folks consider it, because, again, the underlying question from our perspective is, what is the obligation to pay? 13D is a may, and there's very conclusive, and this will be debated, but there's conclusive evidence on either side of the thing of what 13D and what may as a policy question is. I personally, as a citizen of our community, do not believe that I want to leave it to a city manager, without offense, that they can decide whether or not they want to make large sum payments without city council approval. There's restrictions in place for a reason. And this isn't a contract that's in place that's just being administratively paid up to an approved amount. This is a very unique provision sitting inside of the open meeting law statutes.
Well, Mayor.
Briefly, please.
Yeah, Mr. Goulart, everything you just said for the last couple of minutes, those were precisely the questions that are in the request that we made that you apparently don't want to have responded to. Those are exactly the questions that were asked. Do you agree with that? I mean, those are the questions that we asked, what you just
Well, except for the fact that you said we don't want them answered, and I totally disagree with that. You short-circuited the I don't want to have a debate with you here.
Yeah.
You short-circuited it, you fired it off without us.
So you do want an answer, or you don't want an answer?
We do want an answer, but we want to make sure we're part of that final formation. I mean, that's the bottom line. We're all on the same page here, other than how it went in.
So, Mayor, I know you want to move along, and I understand that. I want to respond to a couple of other points that I don't need to talk to Mr. Goulart about.
Yeah, feel
Very
free.
quickly.
Feel free.
2 points about the ethics, the conflict issue. I don't know what to say more than what Mr. Goulart has acknowledged, which is I've talked to the Lawyers Professional Responsibility Board. First of all, we have an ethics official within our firm. We, internal to the firm, don't see a conflict issue. We've looked at the rules of conduct. We understand them. We don't see an issue. We have asked the Lawyers Professional Responsibility Board. There is no conflict. Now, I guess Mr. Goulart's right that you'd have to rely on me. I am your attorney, though. So I'm telling you that that's what the Lawyers Professional Responsibility Board view is. The disagreement apparently is between the residents and Professor Painter about what the rules should say or something, but it's not with my firm. The Lawyers Board says there is no conflict here. So that's ultimately your call to make as the client, but that's the answer from the people that actually enforce the rules. Then with respect to this overriding issue, and it keeps coming up, and I'm going to try and tamp it down again. Lori, help me out if you can. This idea that I have given advice to the city, this council or a prior council, that the city must pay is patently false. That is absolutely incorrect. From long before the first payment was made, we were looking at 13D, which Mr. Goulart correctly notes says may pay. That has never been in doubt. That has never been a question. The question is who decides? And that is exactly the set of questions that the AG opinion request that we submitted asked. So, it's just not factually correct to say that my opinion has been that the city must pay and that I've hung on to that view up until recently. False. Not correct.
Well, didn't you state on the record in 9 May that the city is absolutely required to pay under 466?
Mayor and council, at the meeting where it first arose, I cited 466. Mr. Goulart's right about that. That shouldn't be news to anybody. Mr. Kildow has cited that back to me 7 or 8 times in various letters. And I was wrong. I cited the wrong statute at the initial meeting where it came up and corrected that within a week. So, and that was a month before the first payment was made. So To the extent you need a mea culpa, I cited the wrong statute at a council meeting. I guess I would query Mr. Goulart, who's an attorney, or Mr. Kilduff, if they've ever in their lives cited the wrong statute. I suspect they have, but I corrected that before any payment was made or any issue came up. So to the extent you need to hear that, Mr. Goulart, that's true. I cited the wrong statute, and we relied on 13D and looked at 13D from long before the first invoice ever came to the city. So that's just not correct. And then the last thing is just with respect to, and because I know it's been important, I think I've heard to council members, I have the utmost respect for Professor Painter. I enjoy him on CNN. I listened to him actually on the way over to the council meeting tonight. He was on CNN talking about President Trump and ethical issues. He is not a licensed attorney in Minnesota. His declaration is not an opinion. I think if you read it carefully, you will know that. It's broken out into 3 sections. The middle section, which I think may be the most important to some people, is this idea that the defense costs are too much. And there is no such opinion here. I mean, what the professor says, quite rightly, is he says he hasn't seen the description of the work done, and he can't opine about whether $400,000 is too much. So it's not a legal opinion. He's not a licensed attorney in Minnesota, and I'm certain as an ethics advisor, he would be very careful about making that point himself if he was here. Take that for what it's worth, but it does not reach the conclusions, I think, that some folks have been talking about. So I'm not sure where that leaves us, Mayor. I mean, I'm still concerned, and I think you got to circle back to your letter. I don't know where we are. It's not clear to me whether Mr. Goulart believes he's told the AG not to answer our questions, or whether he's not said that to the AG. You, though, Mayor, have said to the AG, don't answer our questions. I think we're going to need to know what we're going to do with that.
Correct. I didn't say don't answer your questions. I said defer until after this meeting.
Okay, fair enough.
Right? I never told the AG not to answer the questions.
You say, I'm requesting that you take no action on this letter, on his letter.
Until after the meeting.
Well, it doesn't say that. But.
I don't have it in front of me. So, thank you.
So I'm certain, Mayor, I'm not going to debate that with you. I mean, if that's the intent, is that you want to wait until after this meeting, but you're prepared to have the AG answer the questions. I mean, look, my professional opinion here, let's not keep it a secret, is that this community, this council, my client, and this community generally could use some answers to these questions, and I have no problem whatsoever with a second opinion from the preeminent municipal authority, the state AG. So I think that behooves all of us to get that answered if we can get an answer.
Okay, council. Thank you. Council.
I have an additional comment. So that this whole conflict of interest on your part is put to rest, the fact that you consulted with the Lawyers Responsibility Board and were told you don't have a conflict of interest, can you just get that in writing and so we could throw a sign up there every time this comes up?
Yeah, Mayor and council member, I don't know if I can or not. Mr. Goulart's quite right. The way the mechanism, the process works is that you can call or email the board. I emailed. I have a copy of my email, so to the extent people want to see that. And then I have a confirming memo that I did. I hate to talk about contemporaneous memos with all of the news these days, but I did a contemporaneous memo after literally as speaking to or after speaking to the Lawyers Professional Responsibility Board, saying that what I had asked, I was right about, that there is no conflict. So can I ask them to put that themselves in writing? Sure. I mean, I'm a little, it's a little awkward to expect them to do something contrary to their policy, but I can let them know why you're asking and that you'd like to see that. The other thing I'll say, and I mean, Lori, kick me if you want, but look, I'll tell you, it's not common, it's not typical in my practice. I don't like to do what I've done, but I've said to Lori if she would like to go to another law firm that does municipal work, she knows the firms that do it, and get a second opinion that way, she could do that. I think we believed that getting the most definitive second opinion from the AG was the way to do it. I don't know why you'd want to pay money, because you're going to pay money to get a second opinion from another firm like mine. But that's another option, and I haven't been shy about. I would like nothing more than not to sit here and explain myself again about what I have not opined and what I have opined. I mean, that would be great. So,
okay, council discussion.
Personally, I've read the letter to the AG, and I am satisfied with it. I have not been part of the discussions putting that letter together, and I'm curious if there's one or two things that
the Victoria residents would have liked to have added, what might they be, or where are the disagreements?
Ken, go ahead and come up. While we're waiting for Ken, I want to point out that, Mr. Vos, please confirm this for me. Haven't you already told us before that it can take months to get something from the AG? And in addition to that, the AG may choose not to provide any opinion. There's no guarantee we're going to get anything this way.
Mayor, those are both true statements. Yeah, it can take a period of time to get it. I mean, you wouldn't get a response, but for any of the stuff we're talking about tonight, you wouldn't get a response within a week or two or something like that. And yes, it can take months. Take less. And yeah, it's true that the AG does decline, but particularly this is going to go to what Mr. Goulart's going to answer here in a second. The AG is not going to wade into things that are on the verge of being litigated or things that involve past actions that have already occurred that are disputed. What the AG does is they give cities direction about what a city's authority is going forward.
Before an action is taken.
Yeah.
Got it.
And so we've indicated in the letter that Lori will have additional payments requested of her. And so getting clarification on that issue would be helpful. But they're not going to resolve prior disputed whatever.
Nope, got it. Councilmember Gregory, can you repeat your questions for Ken, please?
My question was, I read the letter to the AG. It looks pretty good. Okay, I'm assuming there are other things that you would have liked to add. If there were one or two things, if you could narrow it down a little bit, what would you have liked to ask?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I'm not sure I can answer that as I sit up here. I'm one of several individuals that have been in the room and a group that's been going through it. I think probably the general or the broader question is there weren't much left. There is a disagreement from Mr. Vos as to what they'll answer or not answer. I think the question or the concern we have is, yes, we appreciate that opinion, but if the Attorney General doesn't want to answer D, they won't answer D. And so it's an inclusion-exclusion based on representation versus if you throw ND, they won't answer ABC. And those are kind of the questions where we were kind of reaching. We have some questions that we felt were appropriate. We feel that they meet the definition when you're looking at what the Attorney General does. We had moved through many of those other ones and many of the language strikes. We did produce a very large document. I think both Lori and Mr. Vos can attest to our first draft was quite large. These most recent drafts have been whittled down quite a bit. So we were zeroing in, but we weren't done. And could I tell you right this second? No, I wouldn't be comfortable proffering exactly what that would be. And again, we were close. It was just this sudden acceleration that really impacted our ability to get all of us saying, yep, if we do it this way, and this is how it's proffered in, and this is how it's turned in. Part of it's semantics. There's a bias, and the city attorney and the city manager will tell you there's a bias towards what they want to do in affirmation. We disagree that it should be more biased as opposed to a more balanced and fair piece that's asking questions and not a skewed or a biased presentation. That's where really we were boiling down to, and that was the focus of what we were trying to get to. Is it skewed to get an answer, wired for an answer they want, or is it, these are my problems, give me an answer? And that's kind of where we were getting. And I think it was fairly close. If you read it, we were there. We just didn't get over the finish line, and it went off before it was ready, in our opinion.
Other comments?
I have an additional comment.
Go ahead.
I went through the letter to the AG too. I'm not a lawyer, but it seemed to me it was very reasonably written and understandable and very concise. So I thought it was based. I thought it looked fine. I'm not a lawyer, but I can't see that it's not. I can't see that it's not going to result in some kind of good information from the AG's office. The AG has the basic questions to look at here and knows the intent. So I don't think it's wasted at all, and I didn't see the need to send a torpedo into the side of the ship either.
I'm sorry, you done?
Yeah.
Mr. Voss, didn't you make a statement once before, I think when this was discussed, that the AG's opinion is just another opinion? It doesn't necessarily mean that we would change what we're doing, we as a city, in terms of paying these fees?
I didn't say that, no, Mayor. What I said was that the AG is just an opinion, a legal opinion. It's not a binding decision.
Thank you.
But it's a lot more than just your average Bob Vos, other municipal law firm opinion, because if you rely on the AG's opinions, you get a degree of immunity in future lawsuits. You're entitled to reliance on the AG's opinion. As a legal matter and as a practical matter, the AG's opinions get followed by courts much, much, much more than they don't.
Got it.
I hesitate to think of a time when the AG's opinion was soundly rejected by a court. So they're quite reliable.
Thank you. There was another option that was discussed, and that is going to a court and asking for a declaratory judgment. How come this has never been discussed before?
I believe that option was discussed.
Okay, I'm not aware of it. Do you have any details that you could share?
On April 24th, we went through the options that were before the council members that could participate in the discussion, and declaratory judgment was part of that. We estimated the cost and the time that might take and did not receive direction to pursue that.
But that was never discussed back in 16. I mean, that probably too long ago, right? But as far as you know, the first time, let me ask the question a different way. As far as you know, was the first time that this was brought forward as an option for the council to consider was April 24th?
Yes.
Okay. Declaratory judgment, Bob, if the council were to ask a judge for that, is that something with the legal process? How long would that take?
Mayor, I can't say, and the reason I can't say is because it is a lawsuit. The city would be starting a lawsuit. We'd have to name somebody. We'd have to sue somebody, in other words. And that somebody or somebodies, you might guess on who the likely targets of that would be be entitled to a defense. And they'd be entitled to participate and raise issues and make motions. And I think everyone in this room is pretty familiar now, or a lot of the people in the room are familiar with the amount of time that can be spent litigating cases like this.
So who would we sue? Mayor Funk?
I don't want to prejudge that. I mean, I haven't given it serious thought, but I mean, it's not, the city can't literally just go and not have other folks that are parties to that case have rights to make arguments and bring up issues. And so I mean, we're declaring the city's rights, but there's somebody who's going to have something to say on the other side of whatever view the city is taking.
So I think it was 1992 Attorney General opinion that said go to a court. You can't just go to a court and ask them to weigh in and issue a ruling?
No, and Mayor, people are having eyes glaze over already at this time of the night, but this has been a topic of a lot of conversation with Ken and his group and other times. The 92 opinion, the Hiving opinion that you're talking about from the AG is, I don't think worth throwing away. I think it's important, but the law changed. The open meeting law itself didn't have that may pay language in it. There was nothing in the open meeting law about allowing cities to pay to defend their council members. As a consequence, in response to that AG opinion, the law was amended. The legislature changed the law to give cities express authority to pay if they wanted to, may pay. So it's a little disingenuous, and I would look to Attorney Kildow on this. I mean, he's made the argument in several letters to us that the 92 decision is where we have to look, and we have to go to a court under that decision. That's just wrong. The law was changed in 94. So.
Okay, thank you. Council, any other comments? All right, so I have a couple of comments. I think the residents of Victoria need to know that I spent a lot of time looking at this and went through a lot of different materials, talked with people, and at the end of the day, when I decided to reverse my self-imposed conflict of interest, it was because the sequence of events that you've heard discussed tonight about 466.07, then it was the open meeting law, and then the city manager has the authority to pay. There was also an issue early, the first time a legal bill actually came up on a council consent agenda when I was mayor was 13 February in a meeting that I had with Attorney Voss and Lori Hokanen. Before that, I was told I couldn't remove that from the consent agenda, even though that was not accurate. We heard Mr. Goulart's comments. As this thing has progressed over time, I've also seen the strife that it's caused the city, and I want to get the city out of this. I want to put this to bed once and for all. And so when I started talking with others, I got opinions back that as far as my own conflict of interest, it was clear as mud. And that's what other attorneys said. I'm not necessarily conflicted. I don't have a direct personal financial benefit or interest in the legal fees. I don't gain personally from anything if I participate in this discussion. And other attorneys told me I should be able to participate. Specific to your question, I did not go out and pay with my own money to get an opinion on city business, but I did talk to people, specifically an attorney that both served as a council member for many years and is also an attorney that served in the same role that Mr. Voss has as an actual city attorney. I also talked with other attorneys, not just that one. It's that combination of things that were going on when this letter to the AG, what in my opinion was prematurely submitted because when Mr. Goulart briefed me, he said they hadn't agreed to the final language. When that went in, that's what prompted me to send a letter to the AG as the mayor saying, wait, don't take any action on this. It's my opinion that was submitted early. There are some communication issues, but it's my belief that they knew I was going to reverse myself and then therefore be able to talk on this, and they wanted that opinion submitted prior to this discussion. When it went in before this meeting, it was clearly already in. That's why I submitted that letter. I am also of the opinion that the clincher for me when Professor Painter, who was the chief White House ethics counselor for the Bush administration from 2005 to 2007, writes an expert opinion that tells me our city attorney is conflicted on this issue. That combined with the other data, that combined with the fact that Victoria has been suffering through this and we need a resolution, that combined with the fact that the Attorney General may or may not issue an opinion, and according to what Mr. Goulart briefed me, because of the contentious nature, they will probably not issue an opinion. I want to get a resolution to this. So I decided to remove and reverse myself on my self-imposed conflict, specifically so that we can get a quorum of the council, 3 of us here, so that we can get a truly independent opinion to determine whether or not the city does have an obligation to pay. I will be the first one to support a truly independent opinion that directs the city to pay. The only way I can see that happening is through the court. But I'm not opposed that if this council wants to get a completely independent attorney to review this issue so there's no question of a conflict, then I would be willing to agree to let the 2 council members sitting to my right work with that attorney if that opinion comes back as to something different and allow them to make a decision. But until that happens, I want to be involved to make sure that we do get that independent opinion because I have an obligation, I believe, to the taxpayers to make sure that this thing gets resolved. So I want to do that as quickly as we can and for the least amount of money. We've already been spending a lot of money on this. We've been spending a lot of time, and I want to put it to bed. So, council, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do we get an independent attorney to look at this, or do we, in fact, go ahead and take the action and go to a court and end this once and for all?
To get an independent attorney to weigh in, where would we even begin to look, and who would decide they would have that? I mean, how could we vote on it to see if this individual law firm or individual would indeed be independent?
So as far as I'm concerned, I think what would happen is the 3 of us would go through an RFP process that's limited to get an independent opinion of somebody who has not been involved with this case and not been involved with any of the parties, to look at the issue, look at all of the data, and to then give this council an opinion. If they come back and they agree with Mr. Voss, then I think we move forward. If they don't, then I think we have to review this and to determine and look at what that opinion tells us. I don't think the Attorney General is going to review. I really don't want to go sue anybody either, but we can't let this drag on, and I want to get an end to it. So I believe the three of us could get an independent attorney. We could get that done, I'm assuming, relatively quickly. And then when we get that opinion back, we can look at that and take whatever the appropriate next steps are.
Given the fact that we did take the time and effort to put this AG letter together, what is the harm in waiting for a little bit to see if, in fact, they would weigh in under the circumstances of where we're at? I mean, I agree. I give you the fact that the Attorney General's probability of weighing in on this is probably low, but under the circumstances, we've sent it in, we spent the money.
Do you have any basis for saying that's probably low?
Just gut feeling. Just gut feeling. Okay, I have no clue. I mean, it started out with Mr. Voth giving us an opinion that it may or not, they may or may not weigh in, and probably less than, it was probably less than 50%. Would that be your
Mayor and
opinion?
Council, I don't want to, honestly, given these facts of the letter from the mayor and the call from Mr. Goulart, and I don't know if, quite candidly, if that actually encourages the AG to want to weigh in or discourages. I mean, I don't know. This is a novel situation, to say the least. So I'm not going to give you a 50-50.
Okay.
I don't know.
I thought we started
Less
off
than
at less than
100%.
So I do think it's important, though, to point out the way that something is crafted as far as the request, whether it be a request to the advisory board or a request to the Attorney General, the way that that's phrased and the data points that are provided can influence the end result that comes out of that process. I want this process to be ironclad, free of any potential conflict, and I think the easiest, simplest way to do that at this point is to the three of us agree to get an independent attorney, not connected to any of the parties, to look at this and what's been done and to give us their independent assessment. Getting a second opinion, I think, is the right thing for the city and for the taxpayers. It also removes any questions about whether or not Kennedy and Graven actually does have a conflict if we have somebody
Mr.
unassociated.
Mayor, a second.
Yep, go ahead.
I agree with Councilmember Gregory's idea that we should give the AG a chance. We went through all this. First of all, we talked about this AG opinion for months, or at least a month, and we did it. And now we're walking away from it. This is a moving target. I don't like it. So I think we should give it a chance. Now, what is the protocol where you call the AG up and say, we've got a flash fire here in Victoria. Can you give us some consideration? I mean, what's wrong with calling the AG's office and telling them to please look at it?
Well,
and get some urgency and look at it, because I consider the AG independent. And
there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I got to say, if the will of the majority here now, three-member group, is that you want to pursue the AG opinion still, you're going to have to put in writing that. I mean, clearly, the mayor's letter means something to the AG. Again, I don't know if it actually encourages them or discourages them. I don't know which it does, but I think you're going to have to, if that's the will of the majority here, is that you want it, then you're going to have to write a letter saying that that's the case. I'm happy to follow up and say we're serious or this is important. I got to tell you, and I may have mentioned this to the group when we met, I called and I passed along what's called the opinion on opinions from the AG, which is their opinion about how you request and what they'll answer in AG opinions. It's an old 60s thing. And when I called, I actually spoke to the attorney, the assistant attorney general who handles municipal opinion requests. And I kind of said, I'm calling about this issue. And she said, oh, you're calling from Victoria.
They know about it.
This is not on their radar. This is on their radar. So
right.
It's not like they don't get that this is a big deal out here and maybe across the state, given the Court of Appeals case. So they get that. But we certainly can reaffirm
because maybe they get also that what the mayor did was inappropriate.
Well,
and
I wouldn't encourage. I mean, if the mayor is on board with the idea and just wanted to wait for tonight and just wants a second opinion from somebody, then obviously a letter from the mayor would be more effective than a letter from Lori or something. But I don't know that we need to clean it up beyond that.
So
that turns out to be the will of the majority.
So may I?
Yes.
Here's what I'd like to do then. Hearing the discussion from the council, what I would like to do is for the council to direct the city attorney and the city manager to work with Mr. Goulart, who represents the group, revise the letter so that everybody's in agreement and resubmit it to the attorney general. To do that quickly, we'll set a timeline so this doesn't drag out. Secondly, see if we can, I'm not sure who the best person would be. Potentially, we direct Mr. Vos to get on a conference call with Councilmember Gregory and actually the three of us, and ask the Attorney General to hold on that letter and consider the revised letter that is submitted, assuming the council would agree to a revised letter. And then finally, if in fact the council wants to do that, we submit that revised letter that includes all of the residents' input. If the AG decides not to render opinion, then we will go the next step and get an independent attorney to give us a second opinion so that we can try to get some sort of resolution to this whole issue. So I'm fine with that two-step process. Council, what do you think?
I'm not objecting to the notion of getting a little bit more Victoria resident input into this letter, but we definitely we have to set a time limit. We have to inform the AG that we are going to revise it, but it's got to come in quickly. It's got to come in quickly, and we cannot add too much to it. I agree with Mr. Vos. The more we add, the less chance that they will weigh in.
All right, very quickly, Mr. Goulart, how quickly do you think you can get this done? Mr. Vos, I'm going to ask you the same question.
I don't know if I agree to this yet, but
okay.
Fair enough. I think, and I'd have to confirm with the other folks that have been participating what their availability is. I know I'm around for over the next couple of weeks, so I don't think it'll take very long as there's availability for everybody. Again, I think we can get back in the room relatively fast and spend the hours or whatever it takes to get it finalized from my perspective.
Mr. Vos?
It doesn't deserve saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. I actually really enjoy being in a room with these folks. They're really nice people and smart people. And we have a couple of just disagreements about what is appropriate to be in this letter. If the direction from council is that we send something in that is agreeable to the residents, then they are just going to write the letter. If you're going to direct me to have to agree to something, it's going to be what they want, right?
So if the agreement then is you can't agree, what is the possibility of submitting two letters then? The residents can do theirs and you can submit yours as...
Yeah, Mayor, what I would suggest, Mr. Goulart is right that I didn't think there was. I thought he was telling me something, but he's clarified that he didn't have the ability to submit anything else. If they would like to give to me what they want submitted, I'm happy to submit it as what it is, which is that
part of the packet
we met with and were directed to meet with would want this to be included. I don't think it makes sense just as a practical matter to somehow try to withdraw a letter that went through the U.S. mail and is in the Attorney General's offices and is subject to the Data Practices Act and is not coming back to us and say, just kidding about that, here is the real letter. We can supplement it, but...
So you can do this in a professional and expedient manner so that the original letter stands and there's no question about that. And we'd have a supplement from the citizens or from the citizens that were involved in this. And again, go to the Attorney General's office and say, could you please expedite this? We have a flash fire going in Victoria and we really need to end this issue. And, we could have ended it 7 months ago. Well, we didn't. But, let's get this part of it done.
Okay, so I move that we submit a revised letter to the Attorney General, given the discussion that we've had, where the residents can submit something that Mr. Vos will submit to the Attorney General. In addition to that, also as part of this, I will send a letter to the Attorney General. I'll coordinate that drafting with Mr. Vos. That rescinds my previous letter now that the council's had a chance to talk about that. So I've made that motion. Is there a second?
Point of order, can we have a discussion before a second?
Yeah, once we have a second, if it's a valid motion, we can have a discussion on the motion.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, what I hear a lot, it's not contemplated by Roberts, but I hear a lot of times, I'll second for purposes of discussion. So-
Okay, I'll
Doesn't mean
second
you have
for-
to vote
well-
for it, just because you second it.
Right, just because it's second,
Don't
it's
have
not
to vote
approved.
if we,
No, if you second a
Okay.
motion, that you can vote against it, because
oh,
you
but,
can't vote against it.
no, but I mean, but we would have to vote.
You still have to vote,
Mayor's
yes.
right,
That's
the
the
way he's
problem.
running Roberts, if a motion is made, it has to be seconded before there's debate on it.
Okay, but I had one question for Mr. Goulart. Okay,
So-
and the mayor as well, I'm sorry.
Did you second the motion?
No, I did not second.
Okay, well, then we can't have a discussion on it.
I'll let it die.
All right, the further discussion then?
Okay, just clarification, I think what I heard from Bob, sorry, Mr. Vos, was that we were going to leave the letter stand and then working with the residents, Mr. Vos and the residents, we're going to supplement to what's already there. And I think what your motion was somehow to redo the whole original.
No, it was just to send a supplemental that includes the residents' input. That's what I meant.
Leave the original stand and then supplement it with something.
From the
Mr.
residents.
Vos and
But it still will need will it need agreement on your part?
I would do it that way to allow me to say, it's gonna have to come from me, because that's the way it works, but just say the following, the residents that are interested in this would want included. I mean, I'm not gonna say that I agree or disagree with it.
Okay. We need a timeline also. What the whole problem with this whole thing, from the beginning, is how it dragged on.
Right, that's a good
It shouldn't have
point.
dragged on like that.
So let me redo that motion. So I move that we submit a supplemental letter in addition to the letter that's been submitted. And in that supplemental letter, Mr. Goulart provides the materials that the residents want to be submitted with that packet, and that this all be done in 10 calendar days from today. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of that, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so that carried 3-0. I've got another motion. On the assumption that we hear from the Attorney General that they will not give us an opinion, I then move that we direct the city manager to issue an RFP to get independent counsel not affiliated with any of the parties to come in and render a second opinion for the city and do that in an expeditious manner once we hear one way or the other if the Attorney General is going to issue an opinion. Is there a second?
I would say, as a point of discussion before there's a second, that gives the AG's office incentive not to do anything. But the fact is that we're just ready to go to another attorney. Why should they waste their time?
But that's a valid point, but I don't want to have this keep coming up and having to discuss it again.
I'd rather just not have this motion and get the AG off the button and get this done. And
All right, well, the city attorney's already stated it may take months. They may not issue any opinion at all. I want a backup plan to try to get this.
I agree with your backup plan. I just don't think we should put it out there as a motion until.
Well, the problem is if we don't, then we haven't given the city manager the direction on the next steps if the Attorney General chooses not to act. So I understand what you're saying, but I think the motion is valid. Is there a second? Okay, the motion dies. There is no second. Further discussion?
From your last motion, I think there's going to be time to. We're going to be looking for options. So, if they do in fact turn us down, we're going to be looking for options, and that'll be.
Okay. I have another motion. I move that we direct the city manager not to pay any legal fees until such time as we get an opinion back from the Attorney General. Is there a second?
I would like to amend that motion.
Go ahead.
If we hold with payment, I think, in fairness to the law firm, if we could agree to pay finance charges on pending invoices.
Is there a second to that amendment? No second to the amendment. So the original proposal is we direct the city manager not to pay legal fees until such time as we get an opinion from the AG. Is there a second on that motion?
I have no problem with the city manager paying those legal fees. What is it,
I think we do need a resolution before we pay any more. I do think we do, because, I mean, that's what the whole issue is all about. If we agree to just pay fees, I think it renders everything null and void.
If the opinion comes back and says we're not supposed to pay, the money's been paid.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way to get it back.
So I'll make the motion again. I move that we direct the city manager not to pay any legal fees until such time as we get an opinion from the Attorney General that directs the city or recommends that the city does pay or has to pay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, say
Nay, or opposed.
All right, so that passes 2-1, council member vote in opposition. Council, other questions on this legal fee?
No.
Okay. One final point, the documents, and Lori, I don't mean to catch you off guard here. There was some correspondence, and if you need a moment to look at this, please say so. There's some correspondence where the defendant's old attorney stopped requesting or some fees related to the appeal. He's withdrawn that bill, right? I can't remember which memo it is, and there's nothing up here on the screen. And then I think there was some additional information saying that those appeal-related fees have all been removed. Is that correct? Can you shed a little light on that and make that a little more accurate?
Yeah, that's correct. If you just give me a minute to pull up the memo, get the numbers exactly right. Okay, so this is attached to item 7A. It's titled Memo from the City Manager, RE Claims Roster and Voided Invoices. And one of the letters that's also included in the packet that was received from Mr. Kildow made the statement that payments were made to Hoffberry or Hoffberry Kozar, same firm, two different names, that did not appear on the claims roster. That documentation of all claims rosters and copies of checks were provided during Data Practices Act requests to the Victoria residents, and I thought it would be helpful for members of the public that are attempting to follow along to clarify. Each payment to Hoffberry appeared on a claims roster. Copies of those are attached to this memo. I tried to make it easy by highlighting the amount, the date of the claims roster, and the page on the attached document that those can be found on. And also, I recognize that there's been much conversation with the Victoria residents, with the mayor, with the council members regarding the status of that voided payment, but we've not put that in writing. So I've gone ahead and included that as item 2 to this invoice. During the conversation on April 24th, when I asked the council members that did not have a declared conflict for any and all direction on this matter, one of the things that came up specifically from Councilmember Gregory, he's highlighted himself several times, was a desire to not pay for any work that was billed in relation to the cross appeal. Because at that point, we had received information that the cross appeal had been denied. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't get this exactly right, but basically they didn't reserve the right, and that was a mistake. And so any of that work that was done was sort of a fool's errand. That's not a legal term. But,
is that a technical term?
Yes. So Council Member Gregory asked us to pursue that issue. Hoffberry agreed that all of the work that was included on the invoice that was on the March 13th claims roster in the amount of $9,572 was related to the cross appeal. And so both that check, which was never mailed, and the invoice for that, so the outstanding balance, were voided. Hofberry also confirmed that they had not billed the city for any of the work relating to appealing the decision to the Supreme Court. The decision to deny the cross appeal to the Supreme Court, we were never billed for that. Therefore, there was nothing to either refund or void.
Thank you. And thank you for clarifying that. The question I have, and the reason I brought that up, is it appears from looking at the invoices that there was an invoice on 29 November 2016 for $5,174 and another one on 25 January 2017 for $5,470. Now, I don't think those invoices that, if I understand it right, they were paid by the city, and those checks have already gone out, but it appears that based on the descriptions, there's appeal-related work in there. So the question I have is what kind of analysis was done if the city's not being billed for the appeal costs? Were they in fact appeal costs in these invoices, and are those fees going to be reimbursed back to the city?
I don't know the answer to the question.
Well, I don't want to catch you off guard. Is that something that if we're not going to pay the appeals cost, I'd like to see if we can get an answer on that? If that is in fact related to the appeals, is that money going to be refunded?
So, again, not an attorney. There have been many motions that are related to the appeal that weren't related to the cross appeal. Are you using that language appeal and cross appeal interchangeably, or I need probably a little more clarification?
Correct. So I'm speaking specifically about the cross appeal that Hoff billed the city for. I'm trying to find out whether or not that's related to the cross appeal. It looks to me like it is, and so I'm asking, has there an analysis been done so that we have an answer to the question, a factual answer to the question? And if in fact there's an appeal cost the city has already paid, what's the plan to recoup those, assuming that we're going to recoup those? So I don't expect an answer from you right now. It's something that I think we need to get resolved. Okay, council, any other comments on this item? You don't want to stay here for another hour and talk about it? Cindy, could you ask the other council members to join us, please? If there's no other discussions, we'll move on to reports to the city manager.
Mayor, there are items included in the correspondence packet as usual. There's a draft.
Let's wait for them to join us, please. Okay, go ahead.
Included in the reports of the city manager and the correspondence package is a draft Highway 5 regional trail plan and monthly reports from the Carver County Sheriffs. I'm happy to take questions about that or other issues.
Let me go down here first.
No comment, no question.
No questions.
Councilmember Curley, questions?
Questions on?
Correspondence?
No.
Okay, no questions. Anything else, Lloyd?
No, Mayor.
Bob?
Mayor, nothing, thanks.
Councilmember Crowley?
I have one thing. I would like to commend our city's first responders, and specifically last night at the corner of Red Fox Drive and County Road 11, there was a rather significant accident where, don't know the cause, but a young boy went through a telephone pole and then continued on for another 100 yards or so and destroyed his vehicle. We heard it from the backyard of one of our neighbors and called 911, and within 4 minutes, the first responder was there. And I think there were 7 different vehicles that showed up within the first probably 8 or 9 minutes. And I want to thank the Sheriff's Department, the Fire Department, and Ridgeview Medical for their prompt response. That was tremendous. Thank you.
Here, here.
Anything else?
No.
Councilmember Striegel?
Thank you. The the content of this meeting, I can't, I'd like to make a motion for this council to confirm whether you believe the mayor is conflicted in these matters as we discussed earlier.
That's
I'd like to take
order.
a motion.
We're on reports. Bob?
I object.
Yes, Mayor.
We're in the reports section. We can't introduce new business at this point, can we?
Well, Mayor, you're the parliamentarian, so I think you could make a ruling on that and subject to appeal.
I believe this should go into the next council meeting, and then it can be discussed when it's on the agenda. People know it's going to be talked about.
I object and I move that we overrule the chair.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed signify by saying no. Motion passes 3-2. Go ahead.
So I'd like to make a motion affirming that the opinion of this council that the mayor is conflicted. So if you feel the mayor is conflicted in these conversations, please signify by saying aye.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed signify by saying no.
Abstain.
And one exception. So 3 council members believe it is. I clearly do not. And Councilmember Grigley abstained. More reports?
The remainder of my report is that I move that all decisions that were made by the conflicted member be stricken from the record and nullified.
Second.
Discussion of the motion? I don't think.
What does our attorney say about this?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I'm not aware of any way you can strike from the record things that have already occurred. If the meaning of that is something that, maybe that means something different than what I'm thinking of, but I mean, the minutes will reflect what's occurred, and so.
Point of order, I would just like it on the record.
Bob, that has no force as far as changing the motions that the 3 non-conflicted members approved. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any way that those actions can be undone by the council right now, no.
Okay.
Can we still take the vote?
You certainly can.
Can you repeat the motion, please?
Motion is to nullify the votes taken by the council with a conflicted member voting.
All in favor? Any discussion?
I have discussion. We passed a lot of good things earlier in the meeting. I don't want to undo all the good we did.
The motion is only related to the items where the mayor is conflicted.
Okay.
Yeah, Mayor,
I agree.
I may.
Go ahead.
I don't, as I sit here now, I've never had a motion like this ever presented to me at a council meeting. I don't know what the legal consequence would be. I mean, if you want to sort of make a motion that it's the sense of the council that the mayor shouldn't have participated in items where he's conflicted, I mean, to nullify, I mean, the 2 of you have a conflict, Councilmember Crowley and Councilmember Striegel, on the matters that were acted upon. So are you making a motion to reconsider and nullify actions upon which you've said you have a conflict? I mean, I'm concerned about.
No, this is a motion that is independent of the material that's being voted on. It is simply a matter of what is right and proper, and a conflicted member voting is not. It's creating a legal liability on the city, and I think that is something that should not be allowed.
And can it, council member, I don't want to mess with your motion, except that I guess I do. I mean, can it be a motion to that effect, that that's the sense of the council, is that council members shouldn't make motions on subjects that they're conflicted? I mean, just the language, motion to nullify, I mean, I don't know what that means under Robert's rules. I don't think it means anything, but I think one could interpret that as a motion to reconsider and change the council's vote, notwithstanding your conflict on some of those matters, and I don't want you to go there unless you really intend to go there. I mean, again, it's your call to make on conflicts, has been demonstrated tonight. But, I haven't heard any voicing of an opinion that you don't have a conflict, and I don't want you to get in trouble on that if you don't mean to.
Thank you. No, I do not. I maintain my conflict, and clearly the mayor's conflict as well. And I think that those become illegal votes, and again, independent of the subject matter. And I want to put a motion on the record that reflects that objection to the council behaving in this manner.
All right, well, the city attorney has already ruled that you can't make a motion on the things that you're conflicted with. So I think you've made your point.
Actually, I think that's what he said.
So point of order, we determined earlier that we have an ability to discuss your confliction, and this is about your conflict.
Sure. Go ahead and make the motion then.
The motion's made, it's
Right.
seconded.
So the motion is you believe that I have a conflict. That motion has been seconded. I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of that motion?
We've already cleared that vote and that motion. That's done.
Okay, so I'm now thoroughly confused. What are we trying to discuss here?
I accept that answer.
Wow. Give it.
The motion is that the votes are not appropriate and illegal and should be nullified.
Which votes?
Which votes?
Ones that you voted on.
Votes of the mayor.
Conflicted.
So now we're back to where we started. Are you talking specifically for actions the council took related to the legal fee issue that you're conflicted on, or other items that the council acted on tonight?
Any items where you are conflicted?
Well, you're conflicted on that. You can't discuss anything or influence others related to the legal fee issue. You're not able to discuss or influence other council members. So if you have a motion to nullify or dispute other things the council did as a whole, other than the legal fees, let's go ahead and vote on that.
I withdraw my motion.
Any other items?
None.
Councilmember vote.
It's been a long meeting. I'll say I don't have any comments.
Councilmember Gregory.
I have nothing.
Okay, so a lot has been discussed tonight. A number of statements and opinions were expressed. At the end of the day, in the attorneys I've talked to, the decision about whether or not I have a conflict rests with me. And there's also a concept that I think the public needs to be aware. If you're relying on a legal advice and you get to the point where you have a good faith reason to dispute that legal advice, right, you don't have to rely on that legal advice. I've gotten to the point over the past 6 months, 7 months, given everything that's come in, and then when Professor Painter's opinion arrived, that was enough to convince me that I don't have any longer a good faith reliance on Kennedy and Graven to represent the city in terms of the legal fee issue, which is why I removed my conflict in the best interest, what I feel is the best interest of the city of Victoria, to put this issue to bed once and for all. So I stand by the fact that I removed my conflict, and I will continue to have that conflict removed until such time as I can get an independent opinion that tells me otherwise. That's my report. At this point, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying no. Okay, I only heard 3 votes.
I'm sorry.
Gentlemen, you have to vote.
I'm in for a aye.
Bob, don't they have to vote?
Well, I mean, normally you're either going to abstain or have a conflict, and you usually need a reason to abstain, so I think probably everybody should vote on adjournment.
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned 5-0.
Resign. Grow up. Well, it's true.
Yeah.